John, the head of Comtech, a new computer technology and development company, was driving home after a day's work. Things weren't going well at his firm. There had been crises in the work before. The rise was replaced by a fall, but it had never been so bad. So his thoughts were on one thing. Why was his company losing money? Why the previously prosperous company began to lose orders? So many complaints about their products had never been. What happened? These thoughts did not give him peace. Everyone has problems in life. Some solve them easily, and some run away from them, thinking that everything will work itself out. That's exactly what Veronica thought, running away from her common-law husband. Having hastily packed a suitcase of her and her children's things, she went, as they call it, wherever she looked. "Mommy," a cool light shouted little Tom. "Come on, Green." He pulled her by the hand. Veronica reached the middle of the road and felt that she was falling. Her legs shook, her eyes darkened, but she did not let go of the child's hand. So as she fell, she pulled him with her. John's gaze lingered on her as she began to cross the road. She was tall, too thin for her height, and he didn't like that kind of woman. She was pulling a huge suitcase like a truck and wouldn't let go of the child's small hand. He could barely keep up with the woman's wide strides. While John watched her, the woman had collapsed onto the pavement and was now lying in the middle of the road with the baby crying and screaming for mommy. John was confused for a moment, then jumped out onto the road and picked up the woman and carried her into the passenger compartment of the car. Picked up the suitcase, the baby, and took her to his house. In such situations, one had to think fast, so he called a doctor friend and asked him to come to him urgently. "What's your name, baby?" "Tom." "I'm Uncle John." "You know your mom's name?" "Yeah, Veronica." "Veronica?" "Yes." "You can't spell." "Yes, I can, but my mom says I'll learn." "Sure you will." I couldn't say R either, and then I learned. "Uncle John, what about my mom?" "I don't know, kid. The doctor's gonna take a look at her and tell us." Jack, an internist of the highest caliber, arrived almost at the same time as the owner of the house. John carried Veronica into the house and put her on the couch. After washing his hands, the doctor began to examine the woman and lifting her dress. He saw huge bruises on the inner thighs. There were bruises on her neck and arms, and it was clear that the woman had been abused. "John, I think she's been raped. I'll need to see her at the clinic and get her tested." "What's taking her so long to wake up?" She's just having trouble opening her eyes." "Veronica, can you walk?" I was having a hard time with her words." "You didn't answer my question." She tried to get up from the couch, but as soon as her feet hit the hard floor and her body straightened, her head started to spin again, and the doctor put her back down. Dr. Jack managed to get Veronica into his car. She resisted. She wanted to take the baby with her, but John was able to convince her that Tom would be fine. Her eyes were filled with fear. She knew it was wrong, but her strength was failing her. Back at the house, John's attention was drawn to Veronica's bag. Opening it, he saw a passport. Veronica, 27 years old. She was 35 now, but she didn't look so good. Little Tom was quiet and sat on the couch where his mom had just been lying. "Come on, baby. Let's get something to eat. What do you like?" "I like everything. Mommy's a good cook." "How old are you?" He saw the year of birth in the passport, but there must be something to talk about. "I'm this old," and he showed me all the fingers on his right hand. "That's right, you'll be 5 soon, man," John said with a smile. "Do you like mashed potatoes?" "Yes, that's good. I have an aunt who knows how to cook very well. Look what cutlets and mashed potatoes." The child looked into the deep frying pan and said, "It smells good." The boy ate very carefully and even knew how to use a knife, which surprised the man. "Who taught you how to use a knife?" "My dad. His name is Jacob." "I see. So you're Tom?" "No, I'm Tom." John had never dealt with such small children. He had never had any of his own, though he had always dreamed of a large and close-knit family. But it didn't work out. Ignoring the advice of his parents about the chosen girl for the role of spouse, he got married at the age of 22, had to rent an apartment, a lot of work and moonlighting. But even this money, his Veronica, was not enough. Endlessly pouting lips, bad moods, and telling him off like a boy. It became so familiar and habitual that John stopped paying attention to it. If you're married, you're obliged to provide for your wife. I'm not saying no, but why shouldn't a wife help her husband? Go to work and supplement the family budget. Yes, Veronica wondered, that's not why I got married. And what for, I'm curious to know. To live at my own pleasure, not to work for pennies from morning till night. That was the last straw. I'll give you that opportunity. He packed up his things and left the keys to his rented apartment and left for good. She followed him for another 6 months and asked him to come back, but it took him 2 years to realize that his parents were right. He saw her again when he opened his company and became not rich, but the money appeared. Nick's nose was right. John, let's try it again. Let's start over. Try, but not with me. Veronica was in the clinic for a week. Jack gave her a cell phone so she could see her Tom every night. He played in a room with lots of toys, was cheerful, and most importantly, healthy. Thank you so much, John. I'll never pay you back. Oh, come on. I'm glad I could help. And you got a great kid. He's trying to save the hours, so maybe by the time you leave the clinic, he'll be a surprise. She was crying and couldn't say a word. They put the baby in daycare. John would drop him off in the morning, and Lana, a good, kind woman who lived next door to her daughter's family, would pick him up. Although Veronica saw her son every day, all sorts of thoughts came into her head. She had to restrain herself from these thoughts. She needed strength to recover, so she had to think about good things. John's appearance in her life had shifted her idea of people in her brain, because living in her husband's house, she had lost her faith in kindness. The clock was already midnight. It was the last night in the clinic. She could not sleep. There were so many emotions inside. It was necessary to solve many problems. With housing, with work, with kindergarten. There are many questions. There are no answers to any of them, but she will try to do everything for the sake of her son. All the same, sleep took her in its tender embrace, and only in the morning, a young nurse woke her up to give her the last injection. Meeting Veronica from the hospital was John and his son. It seemed to her that Tom had grown and gotten better. Mom, I missed you. I missed you too, son. Mommy, Uncle John taught me how to say fish, cancer, frame, radio. John smiled. He liked that boy. Thanks, John, for everything. Glad I could help. John, please take us to the hotel and I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow. I'll pick up your stuff later, okay? How about this? You'll look for an apartment in my house. I don't want to drag the kid around to hotels. Then he has to go to kindergarten tomorrow. His teachers praise him. He's already found a girlfriend there. Son, don't make any decisions without your mom. Uncle John says a man should be independent and reliable. Oh, you guys are getting serious. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, let's go home. The table was set. Tom was getting the hang of it. He knew his way around. He felt at home. Lunch turned into dinner and my son fell asleep in Veronica's arms. She put him to bed and returned to the table. Is everything all right? John asked, looking into the woman's eyes. Everything is just fine, Veronica replied, running her palm through his hair, then over his face, bringing a smile to John's face. He's learned to play gadgets and he can spell the letter R now. He really wanted to be home in time for you to come home from the clinic. This is really a surprise to me. Thank you. How did you get him into daycare? I know it's not easy. Lana's daughter, who picked him up from daycare, is the supervisor. It's simple. There was silence for a moment. Veronica spoke first. You probably want to know what happened to me. She looked at John, of course. You must know who you let into the house. But I don't think we can do it in one evening. You'll have to stay at my place with my son. Well, if you're not too bored with us. Not at all. I was born and raised in the country. You may have noticed that I'm tall. That's great. Probably only in the village they called me Kolomenskaya Versta, or fireman's messenger, whoever liked it. I didn't pay much attention, but I was a little offended. Boys were shy to approach me because they were all shorter than me. My parents were simple people. My dad worked on a tractor. My mom was a milkmaid. She worked from morning till night, so my grandmother brought me up. She was the only one who knew what they called me at school. I'll never get married like that, Grandma. Who needs such a pole? Don't be in a hurry. At the right time, the right man will find you. I believed my grandmother, and when I met Jacob, Tom's father, I thought my grandmother's words were prophetic. He did find me. After high school, I went to the county seat and went to college to become a model designer. I've always been an excellent draftsman. Skinny, long, but as I grew up, I gained meat, rounded out, and in college, they started calling me a model. "What have you forgotten in this college?" said the girls in the group. "With your height and figure should go to modeling." So after graduating from college, I went to New York. Casting passed and began to work as a model. It was hard work, I was tired, but they loved me in the sense that it was easy to sew on me. It was at one of these shows that Jacob saw me, and it was a siege. He was 10 years older than me, handsome, dressed expensively, but I was afraid of him. He looked like a bandit. No, not the knife-wielding kind, but the kind of gangster they call a businessman now. He had a fiery temper, and it was better not to get under his hot hand. And I'd been hit more than once. That's why I was afraid of him. He never suggested marriage, but he provided for me. And when Tom was born, he was glad. I thought that was happiness. I just never got to see the real happiness. I tried to leave several times, but immediately I remembered hard times, debts, lack of money. My friend kept whispering in my ear, "You're a fool, Veronica. Everyone envies you. Such a man paid attention, wanted a child from you, and you? Remember, my dear, that figure, breast, and everything that you have on your face is temporary. And this temporary comes so quickly that it becomes scary, and you are in the group of divorcees rushing. Take into account, you are a special divorcee with an extra, such not every man will pull and in general will want to pull, who meets someone else's kid and I put off leaving every time. But this time was the last straw. Did he rape you?" John asked a question and regretted it at once because Veronica shrank, her hands shook, and the answer to the man was silence, oppressive, sepulchral, pressing like a tombstone. "Did he rape you?" John asked the question and regretted it immediately because Veronica clenched, her hands shook, and the man's answer was silence, oppressive, sepulchral, pressing like a tombstone. The eyes of a frightened woman looked up at him. She clasped her trembling fingers around the hot mug, from which there was a pleasant tea aroma, and taking in more air, wanted to answer his question, but she didn't. "Whatever you tell me now, I won't run away with my heels clicking. I'll help you if I can. You're safe here. This is my home, and only the person I want here can enter it. I apologize for the situation on the road," and she's blushing. Come on, no one is immune to asshole violence. Only the last asshole would raise his hand to a woman. I always thought that, besides hands sure of strength, a man should have a heart. That a man should take the initiative. We've completely forgotten the age of romance. Now it is not fashionable to invite on a date, to the movies on the last row, treat ice cream. You go straight to, she looked at John, and he did not avert his gaze. Many of her statements he agreed with. He watched her nervously walk around the table, sipping sips of her long, cool tea. She was indeed a tall girl. If he was 6 feet tall, she was about 10 centimeters shorter. Very thin, but it didn't affect her face. She had the right shape. Her eyebrows may be a little thicker than today's fashionistas wear, but those freckles could drive any man crazy. Blue eyes. Her nose was a little upturned, like Tom's, and her lips were her own, without silicone. Her hair was in a ponytail now, but when he carried her into the house, after she'd fallen, it had spread out on the pillow. It was long and heavy, but she was a dyed blonde. Not a beauty, but very pleasant and far from shallow. When he woke up from his thoughts, she was silent. It was obvious she was gathering her thoughts. Jacob went to the season opening at the fashion house. There were a lot of people, all dressed up in beautiful outfits, the men in strict suits with bow ties. Champagne was flowing, music was playing loudly, laughter was heard from everywhere. For some reason, I was not worried. Probably I did not understand the degree of responsibility that the fashion designers and the management of the fashion house had put on us. The show was excellent, which I did not doubt. We were all given a bonus, and I remember I used it to buy warm boots. At the second show, I noticed a man sitting on the front row. He caught my eye because he was wearing dark glasses. His hair to hair and lightly unshaven. I noted to myself that he was an interesting man, but when this interesting man met me at the exit and offered to get into his car, which looked more like a tank, I refused, or rather, I was afraid. He did not ask me, but ordered me straight away. Get in the car, I won't hurt you. The phrase sounded ambiguous with a hint, say, and the money will be only after. I guess he preferred this format of relations. He forgot about romance or didn't know there was no place for it in his life. Usually there were no misfires, so this time he hoped to make an effect. But the beauty did not fall for the usual tricks of the young man. I'm not interested in your proposal. I did not get into the car with strange men and do not poke me. We did not drink on a broad rift. The stranger's eyebrows went up. The refusal clearly hurt the man, but he was not going to give up. He's not a boy to pout his lips and take offense. Did not agree this time, will agree in another. But the girl was firmly planted in his head. And Veronica, taking advantage of his confusion, quickly disappeared in the car girlfriend, who took her home. From that day on, the siege of the fortress began. As Veronica saw Jacob again at a fashion show, he went to the fashion house with persistent constancy. Endless thoughts about the girl turned the grown man into a horny teenager. And one day, when she came out after work, he stood with a large bouquet and introduced himself as Jacob. Veronica said then, embarrassed, "I know," said the man. "I know all about you. Can I take you to a restaurant for dinner?" I was really hungry, so I went with him. He brought me home very late and invited me to the restaurant again the next day. No, Jacob, no offense. I'm a bit of a fan of these places. If you want to see me, let's just walk around. He agreed, and we walked around New York City all evening so I could finally admire her beauty. That's how we began to see him often, and in 6 months he invited me to his house. Of course, I understood why he called me there and how it could end, but I thought that he was my happiness. He found me, as my grandmother said. After living in his house for a month, I began to feel a terrible pressure from his side. "Veronica, you won't be working at the fashion house anymore. I don't want ugly men looking at my woman. Stay at home, take care of yourself. Swimming pool, fitness, beauty salon, wherever else you go. Add more." From idleness, he flashed such a look that inside everything turned cold. "I don't want to sit at home and be a burden on your neck. I like my job, and that's not the deal. You're not my husband, and I'm not your wife." He left for work, slamming the door so hard I was surprised it didn't come off its hinges. It took me 15 minutes to pack my things, and I left again to my apartment, which fortunately did not have time to refuse. In the evening, I had work to do, and Jacob sat frowning in his seat with the bouquet. I didn't look at him and went home through the back exit. He rang the doorbell of my rental apartment for a long time, which I never opened. Luckily, it was the end of the season at the fashion house and everyone was on vacation. I'd rented another apartment, giving up my old one, which was very comfortable and cozy, but otherwise Jacob wouldn't let me rest. I even changed my SIM card. I decided to get out of Jacob's life completely. I managed to do it for exactly 3 weeks. He had everyone on edge, and one day I saw him with a bouquet when I came out of the driveway. "I'm sorry," he rushed up to me. "I'm an idiot, a jealous idiot. You're so beautiful and everyone's staring at you. I'm going crazy." "Jacob, this is why we shouldn't be together anymore. I'm not quitting my job, and I'm not going to fight with you about it. Let's just be friends." "No, I don't want to be friends. I want you to move back into my house." "Do you hear yourself? I am. I demand, I'm going crazy. But where are my desires? They don't exist and can't exist if you're around, Mr. Jacob." I got away this time, but he wouldn't give up. There was no point in changing apartments. He'd find one anyway, so I decided to leave the house less. I saw his car parked in the driveway every morning. "Diane, what do I do? Jacob won't let me leave. Come to my house." He's parked in the driveway every day, and I can't get out. It's not like he stays out there all night. When he leaves, call a cab and come to my place. So I did, and for another week I was fine. But as soon as I got to work, he took his seat in the front row. "Oh, Veronica, there's your handsome boy again. He's your destiny after all. You can't abuse a man like that." "I'm sorry." "That's right, he loves you." After work, Jacob was waiting for me again, so I didn't run away from him. "Okay, Jacob, I'll go with you, but let's make a deal. I'm working. No dictating, no pressure." "I agree," he said, and I moved back in with him. After I moved in, I got pregnant quickly, even though I was on birth control. I didn't need a baby yet. I had nothing of my own. I lived in Jacob's house. I wasn't a wife, so I didn't have any rights, and then I had a baby. I went to my doctor, showed her the pills, and told her that they didn't help prevent pregnancy, but the opposite. They're the best on the market right now. They're the most reliable. Maybe you've been forgetting to take them. Then it really can happen. I was about to leave when she opened the box. Veronica, what did you bring me? These aren't the pills I prescribed for you. What do you mean, the wrong ones? I was surprised. They're the ones I bought at the pharmacy. Yes, the box is the same and they look very similar, but you can't fool me. Who had access to those pills? Where did you keep them? In my bedroom, in my bedside table. I think they're pacifiers. Vitamins at best. Leave them with me. I'll get them to the lab. That's how I found out Jacob switched my pills with regular vitamins. I had to apologize to the doctor. I didn't know how to tell him, but I didn't want to look stupid, so one night I did. Jacob, I can't believe you had to be so treacherous to get me to commit to you. You were thinking of yourself again, and I trusted your manly word. Do you realize what a terrible thing you've done? I can't trust you now. Tomorrow you'll be sick of me and you'll poison me. Fortunately, he did not start to gawk with surprise and refuse, and immediately said that I am very stroppy and tame me can only a child. So ended an episode in my life called The Taming of the Shrew. I was saved by my height and thinness. I worked practically until I gave birth, under Jacob's evil stares. Tom was born, my sweet son, my joy and pride. Everything had changed in the house except one thing. I was still not Jacob's wife. It was all right with him. He loved his son and did everything for him. Now he was happy. I was at home with the baby, never going out. He brought everything. Groceries, things, diapers, everything. I only went out for a walk with Tom, and then around the house under the supervision of the guards. Then I realized what a golden cage was and how I wanted to escape from it. But the child held me back. When Tom turned 3, I started talking about work. Jacob, I want to get a job. Where you want to put the baby? We'll get a nanny. We won't be the first. We won't be the last. No, he said shortly. He didn't explain anything, but I insisted, and that's when we had our first big fight. You keep me in this cage. I can't even meet my friends. What kind of captivity is this? And that's when he hit me for the first time. He smashed my lip. My nose was bleeding. You wanted to see your friends? Go on. I'm not keeping you. So I went out all night. Probably to the casino or to the girls. I didn't care. All night I lay with ice on my face, but there was a huge hematoma on my cheek. I got a call from work. Veronica, are we expecting you? How are you? Are you coming back? How long can you wait? Well, considering your previous achievements, 6 months, others wouldn't wait a month. You know how many people are interested. But there aren't many girls with your height and figure. Okay, thank you very much. I'll try my best. It was well past midnight. I'm tired, John. I'll see you tomorrow. Do you have security here? They won't let anyone in here. Don't worry, there's security. I'll tell them not to let anyone in. I'm not expecting anyone, and neither are you. Okay, I'll feel better that way. She fell asleep next to her son, calmly and without dreams. When Veronica woke up, the house was empty. Oh my God, I overslept. It's a shame. A stranger taking care of my child. She went down to the kitchen. There at the stove stood a pleasant woman in a beautiful apron and cooked. The aromas were appetizing and even enticing. Her stomach rumbled immediately and the woman turned around. It seemed to Veronica that her body reacted very loudly to the mind-blowing odors. Good morning. You're so fragrant, it's impossible to remain indifferent. Your son gives me the same compliments. He does. He'll be a ladies' man. I think he'll be a fine man. Thank you. Sit down to breakfast. Lunch won't be for another 3 hours. John said he'd be here for dinner, which means 6 o'clock. After breakfast, she went to look around the house. The first floor was occupied by a large living room, kitchen, John's study, utility rooms, and 2 servants' quarters. And on the second floor was the master bedroom, 2 guest rooms, a shower, a bathtub, a toilet, a small exercise room, and a small room hastily furnished for Tom as a playroom. Veronica's heart squeezed with gratitude to the man. I'm lucky, Veronica thought. Even though I hit my head pretty hard, I met John. She went into his office. She quietly opened the door and poked her head in and looked around. There was a nice desk, a big chair next to it, a lot of books and flowers. The violets were all in bloom. It was gorgeous. So they like it here. She remembered her grandmother's words. A flower will never bloom if it is not happy with that person. On the coffee table, she saw pictures. John was looking at her from one. Brunette, no more than 35 years old. Small curls cut very short and barely visible. Dark chocolate eyes, sensual lips. He looked like he was looking into the soul. It was obvious that he didn't come to be photographed on purpose, and the lens caught him by chance. His shirt was carelessly unbuttoned a little more than was customary for men. She noted that he was an interesting man, but even that wasn't the main thing. He was kind and decent. The other pictures were of his parents and friends. She stayed a little longer in his abode and went to lie down, her strength not yet fully returned to her. She woke up to someone shaking her by the arm. When she opened her eyes, she saw Tom's son. Who brought you here? Lana. She's nice. He lay down next to his mother. I missed you so much. Didn't you have a bad time with Uncle John? He's interesting, but I missed you. My darling boy, I've been dying to see you too. But the doctors wouldn't let me go until the treatment was over. It was just the two of them at dinner. John didn't show up as promised. They didn't wait for him and fell asleep. John had a lot of problems at the company. His security service did not sit idle and checked all the streams where the information goes from whom and, most importantly, to whom. Tomorrow, John allowed all the employees to leave from lunch under the pretext of sanitizing the cafe on the floor below. He and his guys stayed the night to set up the security cameras. For the surveillance cameras, John supervised all the work. The security guys were great. Not jocks, bouncers, just smart. They took a few people at a time and came to John a week later with the results. It was all on a flash drive. John was furious. The person he trusted the most was working for the man who was ruining his reputation. All right, Mickey was feeding him information, and Tony, why is he off the hook, is our biggest customer. So this Christian guy fights with Tony, letting him know we're so cheap, working on two fronts. Who's Christian? Never heard of him. He's an ex-gangster, used to dealing in the 90s, thinks he can do it now. Find out more about him. All right, I'll have it on your desk in a couple days. Keep the cameras on a permanent basis. I'll only trust them after I've checked. I want Mickey in my office first thing tomorrow morning. Look the bastard in the eye. See what he's been missing. He arrived home in the morning, quietly showered and went straight to bed. But he woke up at 7 o'clock, as usual. Tom came into his room. Come in, John told him. The boy climbed up on his bed. Are we going to kindergarten today? Do you want to? I don't want to go a little bit. I want to be with my mom. Then it's settled. You have today off, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. That's how long you can be with your mom. Thank you, Uncle John. He took his face in his little hands and kissed him on the cheek. John felt it. It felt incredible. He had never felt like this before. Everything was turning over inside him. The contact with his palms let something warm and important into his heart. At some moment, he even wanted to press him to his chest, to feel this childish sincerity and to see his smile without two teeth. I'm getting old. Hissing a child brings a tear to my eye. How imperceptibly old age crept up, the man thought with a smile. He remembered his serious conversation with Mickey, grumbled, and quickly left for work. Tom was so happy to be with his mom all day long. How good it was talking to you, boy, not leaving Veronica's side. And I'm very well with you, my darling. After breakfast, they read, then played, walked, and after lunch, the child fell asleep like a dead man. And Veronica decided to call Diana. Hi, friend, she said cheerfully. When are you going to work? Soon. How's it going? Same old, same old. How are you and your handsome boy? What's new? She was always asking the same questions. She believed that the main thing in a girl's life is to find the right man who will provide from head to toe and solve all problems. She was not very successful, but Diana did not lose hope, and after each failure again threw herself into the battle. She went to the most expensive restaurants, to prestigious exhibitions, where you can often see wealthy men, young and not so young. Veronica was used to relying only on herself. She left her parents early and realized that there was no one to help her but herself. She studied, worked part-time, solved her problems as best she could, including material ones, and never relied on anyone, especially not on a man. She did not rush into a relationship, as in the maelstrom, and cautiously looked at those who tried to hit on her. More often, she ignored all the signs of attention, waiting for the one and only one that her grandmother said, "Veronica, are you all right?" She was wary of such a question. "Yeah," she stretched out. "Why do you ask?" "So yours came running with bulging eyes, wanted to see you, went to the bosses, had heartbreaking conversations with me, screaming his wife and child are missing, SOS. And what did he want? I wanted to know where you were. Where are you really? Maybe I'll come to your place and we'll talk. It doesn't matter where I am. Don't you trust me?" "Diane, it's okay. No offense. Bye. I'll call you later." After that conversation, she felt uneasy and regretted calling her friend. What did she say? Jacob asked Diane, who had been standing next to her the whole conversation. Diane was about to dial her number when Veronica called her. She didn't say anything. She said it's the right thing to do. "You must have hurt her badly if she ran away from you and took her son with her." "Don't worry." Diana took up to calm the man. "Diana, such handsome men do not leave her," she purred, buttoning up her shirt. "Let's go somewhere distracting. Your Veronica's coming. She's not going anywhere." She came so close to him that she could smell his perfume. She leaned her cheek against his unshaven one and cried out, "You're as prickly as a hedgehog. Shall we go out tonight?" "Let's do it next time." And after dropping the $5,000, walked out of the fashion house. She liked Jacob when he first come to their show, but for some reason, he was attracted to Veronica. What did he see in her? Well, she had a nice figure, but that's about it. Those freckles that makeup artists put on every time they did a makeup job were a nightmare, but Jacob liked it. "I don't understand these men," Diana reasoned. "I'm probably doing terrible things to my friend," she thought, "but it's not my fault, it's Jacob. He's provoking me, stroking my arm, and for nothing. I can't help myself and do something shameless. And what to do? I'm a living woman. I justify myself." Asterisk, 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 asterisk. John's workday got off to a rough start. First of all, he only got 2 hours of sleep. And secondly, Mickey was waiting for him outside his office. Looking at him, John thought he hadn't slept at all, which was almost true. He'd come to work straight from the casino. I guess he hadn't completely lost his conscience, because it was embarrassing to look John in the eye. He took him to work for him, taught him a lot of things, and considered him his friend. But Mickey was on the money. He was not only a good programmer, but also a talented mathematician. He developed an algorithm on how to win at casinos. It did not work at once. About a year he developed, tested in theory, and several times in practice. And all this time his program did not fail. He bought himself a nice car, a small apartment, though not in the center, but his own. After the first winnings, he visited the casino 2-3 times a month to check the new changed algorithms, and again Mickey was a winner. He was noticed and the casino workers became simply afraid of him, but he didn't abuse his luck. Once noticed, the very angry looks, did not give the appearance, but did not go to the casino for 3 months. He began to live large, changed the apartment, a more prestigious in the center. He started vacationing abroad. This could not afford even the owner of the company, Comtech John, but Mickey could. When asked by a friend where such opportunities came from, Mickey replied briefly, "Luck." One day, leaving the casino, he was stopped by a man. He was dressed expensively. Mickey now immediately recognized branded clothing. "Listen, kid, tell me the secret to your success." To tell you the truth, Mickey was scared. "It's called luck. Don't take me for a fool. I know a little bit about computers too, and I used to be good at math. Tell me." "There's nothing to tell," said Mickey, getting in the car, but the man was persistent. "Look, I'm not for free. Whatever dough you want, I'll pay you. I don't need your money when I work for a great firm and casino luck is on my side." He thought he told his new acquaintance enough to get him off his back, but he was wrong. The new acquaintance wasn't backing down. One day, getting into the car after another good win, a lanyard was thrown around Mickey's neck from behind. He wheezed, kept the Veronica around his neck, making it a little easier to breathe. And only when his arms were hanging like whips was the grip loosened by patting him his cheeks. "Shall we talk?" an unfamiliar voice asked. Mickey could only nod. Taking a bottle of water and sipping almost half of it, he turned around. In front of him sat what appeared to him to be an unfamiliar man who had told him to keep the car lights off. "Ready, awake?" "Ready," he wheezed. It would have been a long time ago, and opening the door, Jacob shouted, "Go, he's ready." A familiar man sat down next to him and introduced himself, Jacob. Mickey said and grinned wryly, realizing that the man sitting across from him had known all about him for a long time. Jacob asked in a winning voice, "Look, I don't have anything to tell you. I have sketches, numbers, calculations, and they won't tell you anything, much less help you, and I can't explain anything." "Do you play blackjack or poker?" Jacob asked interestedly. "I play everything. I'm interested in where and how accurately my algorithms work." "You're not bluffing." Mickey didn't dignify him with an answer. He felt superior to the man who was listening with his mouth open. "I can tell you what bets to place, but I won't be playing that day. But let's agree that I'm not going to stand behind you for the rest of my life." "Okay, a month." "No, that won't work. I'm not at the casino every day. Let's do it 3 times. "No, that's not enough. 5 times." "Okay, 5 times and don't come near me again, especially not with a lanyard." "It's a deal." The evening at the casino began with Jacob undecided. He stood between the roulette table and the poker table. He chose roulette. The bets were placed and the game began. Jacob's game started right away. Tonight was clearly his night. Mickey stood behind him and whispered in his ear. The roulette partners smiled wickedly, the smartest ones leaving the table and the bravest losing their last money. "Come on, Jacob. Let's go. We have to stop in time." The man nodded, collecting the chips he'd won, and stood up from the table. He left the casino and quickly got into his car. Mickey was glad that his new algorithms hadn't failed him. The very next day, Jacob called Mickey, but he had other things to do. "Don't you think I have other things to do than go to the casino every day? I'll call you when I have time," and he hung up quickly. Jacob was not happy. He stopped sleeping and took it out on Veronica, raising his voice at her and blaming her for everything. It wasn't until the following week that Mickey was able to go to the casino. But this time his system had malfunctioned and Jacob had lost in a landslide. He shook Mickey like a punching bag. "You can kill me," the man shouted, "but I warned you there's no algorithm in the world that never fails. You're gonna pay me back, okay? I'm not going to reimburse you, it happens. It didn't work for me every time." Indeed, the next time everything went well again. The winnings were so huge that the administration asked to pay the reward in installments, as they had a maximum amount that could be withdrawn. Mickey's intuition urged her to stay away from Jacob, but the desire to get a lot of money drowned out her voice. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that they were able to go to the casino again. Jacob was tearing up. Mickey had a work emergency, so he had to stay late to get his assignments in on time. The 3rd and 4th camping trips were a failure, not at all. And Jacob had his fists in the air. Mickey had to take a week's vacation at his own expense, saying he had to go to his parents' house. Jacob was threatening him, and he'd already written him a letter telling him how much he owed him. But Mickey didn't have that kind of money. The last trip had been so modest that it hadn't even lifted Jacob's spirits, but instead lowered them to "I want to die." "You got the money?" "No, I don't have that kind of money, and I won't for the next 5 years." "Sell the car." "Why on earth would you play? I warned you the system was flawed, so it's not my fault." "Look, you're getting a little talkative. You might get in the car and not make it to the office. Get your money ready, asshole." To say Mickey was scared is an understatement. He tried to raise the money, but it was a pathetic attempt. "I've got a proposition for you," Jacob said on the phone. "I need some data on the orders your company got from Tony. You bring it to me, it'll clear the debt a little. We'll see about that. Your boss's firm is bothering me. There's too many of us on the market. Help me, I'll help you." and he decided to do it, figuring he'd do it with his shirt on. And so John's troubles began. And now Mickey was sitting outside his office and didn't know what to say for himself. It was embarrassing to talk about the shirt that was closer to his body. He suddenly remembered how much good John had done for him. As soon as Mickey walked into the office of the head of the firm, John realized that he would no longer work and trust this man. John wondered how he could be his friend. Those running eyes, the crunching of his knuckles, the pale face, and completely insincere look. He was all fake. Right now, he didn't like this man at all. There were many questions about him, and the main one was why had he been so ungrateful? After stopping at the door, Mickey went to the desk and looked at the manager and said, "John, let me write a letter of resignation." "You will, because I can't trust you as I did before. Don't look at me like a beaten dog. You won't see any compassion for me. Believe me, I had no choice. There's always a choice. You just have to do it right. You did it wrong. Tell me who you gave it to." "John, I'd advise you not to mess with this Christian. He's a real asshole. You two deserve each other. Tell me." When Mickey stopped talking, John felt that his story was true, that he was sorry for what he had done, but he decided not to say anything to him yet. "So here's the deal. What you did for Tony and then sold to Christian, you fix it yourself. John, I want you to back out of this job and give me the money up front. It'll be easier." "What are you talking about? You're suggesting I give up. Where am I gonna get the money to pay you back like you're suggesting? I pay my employees' salaries and you too. You don't want to give it back. It's a lot of money." Mickey shook his head. "Well, I don't think anybody would. You're going to call Tony and tell him you've come up with a much more interesting solution to his order." "But I haven't." "I see. Here's your assignment for the week. Work hard and surprise Tony. Then you write a statement and I'll never see you again." John's week was up, and he was still there. Nothing interesting came into Mickey's brilliant head. Friday night, John called him in. "How'd it go?" Mickey replied, shrinking back. "I'll give you an update on Monday. I've still got to check the calculations." "Is it really something interesting?" "I don't know. You'll see for yourself." John went to the store, bought Tom a new constructor, packed a cake, candy, ice cream, a bottle of good cognac, and rushed home. He felt good at the mere thought that he was welcome. After that evening, when Veronica said she was tired, they never spoke again. Maybe tonight, this Friday night, they could sit longer and he would finally learn the whole truth. Tom welcomed him like his own daddy, but unfortunately, he'd never gotten to experience parental happiness. "Uncle John, hello." "Hi, you're saying R so well. Good job." Veronica stood back and smiled, looking at the relationship between her son and a strange man. He was afraid of his own father. He had been raising him to be a man since he was 2 years old. "Stop hugging and kissing him. He's not a girl," Jacob shouted. "But he's just a baby hiding the baby behind his back," his mother replied. "My orders are not negotiable," yelled the father. "Don't scare the child. We're not in the barracks," replied Veronica. "Why do you have such a long tongue? Why don't you respect your husband? Keep silent." "No." She's attacking him with her fist. Veronica grabbed Tom and left out of her husband's sight. She was afraid of him. And with a strange man, her son felt calm and quite happy. "How was work? You've been in trouble. You haven't been yourself all week." "Yeah, but it's getting a little better now." "Rat caught, cornered." "You can't corner a rat. It can bite so hard to survive. It's easier to just let it go so it doesn't make things worse." "It won't." John's phone rang and he excused himself to the study. She watched her son unwrapping a present and heard Christian's last name. "Did Christian call again?" John asked in surprise. "What does he want this time?" "Don't say yes, let him go to the casino, or you'll have to take off work to visit your parents again." "I know all about it. What else you got?" "How's the assignment?" "It's good. You've got a good head. Bye." Looking into Veronica's frightened eyes, John asked, "What's wrong?" "Who's Christian?" "Sorry, you were talking loud." "Yeah, he's an ex-gangster that my employee leaked information to. He's got me in a lot of trouble." "Tom, let's go pack. We're leaving." Grabbing the baby by the hand, she rushed upstairs to pack. "Veronica, what's going on?" And after 2 flights of stairs, he stood in front of the door to the children's room. Can you tell me what it was about the Christian name that scared you so much? It was the first time he'd ever seen tears fall in hailstones. It always seemed, when they showed it in movies, that it was a montage, that tears couldn't flow like that, one after another. But looking at this woman, John realized they could. If I don't leave your house, you're going to have problems not only at work, but in your personal life. He took her by the shoulders. You can answer in normal language. I don't need riddles. I have enough of them at work. She took a deep breath. Christian is my husband. He's the one I ran away from, the one who raped me when he and his friends got drunk. Mostly him, of course. One of his friends had a vase through my head. Another one held me down. And my husband was a bastard who abused me in front of them because I refused to let his friend to have a drink with them. That was the last straw. I didn't want to stay home anymore. And now he's looking for me. John was really dumbfounded that the thug was Veronica's husband and that he had allowed himself to be bullied like that. Do you understand now? You let me go now? But where are you going? You haven't even found an apartment. I'll stay in a hotel for a couple of days and I'll find what I need. No, Veronica, I won't let you go now. I'm not afraid of your Christian. You should be. He's a ruthless man without shame or conscience. How did you end up with him? I told you about the siege. That's how I got involved. How do you know he's looking for you? I called Diana. She told me. You shouldn't have called. He can track you on your cell phone. Let's change your SIM card. Come on, don't scare the baby. Let's go to dinner. We'll talk later. John, I don't want to drag you into a fight with that monster. I'm a big boy and I'll take care of it myself. So Veronica stayed. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening when at last Tom got tired of playing and running around and went to sleep. John and Veronica were sitting in the dining room eating ice cream. Tell me, what does your husband do? John asked. He didn't like it when I asked him what he was doing. You don't have to get involved in my business, he told me. You know less, you sleep better. And I stayed out of it. But I did hear that his computer company was going through a rough patch. I know that he steals cars and jams the license plates. He once had men come to him with such faces that it's scary to remember. I've always tried to stay out of their sight, and Jacob's just as bad. Veronica, make your specialty coffee for the guests. And I was shaking, trying to put everything on the table and run away. They were always arguing, fighting, and they used a lot of bad language. My child. And I would go to the back room so my son wouldn't hear this outrage. I'm sorry I asked you to tell me, John said guiltily. The memories are difficult, and I can tell you're uncomfortable. She didn't answer him, but continued. The last time they came, they were strangers, young guys, quite handsome. I even thought, well, this time it would be without any language and the negotiations would be quiet. But no. One of them caught me by the arm and pulled me down onto his lap. Jacob jumped up and hit me. Why are you wiggling your ass in front of men? Get out of here. I didn't have to deal with him and I wanted to leave. Veronica, come have a drink with us, the guy said. Don't touch me. That's no way for a guest to behave in someone else's house, I yelled. He stood up, pulled me against him, and I fumbled for the vase and smacked him on the head. The other one grabbed me, my dress snapping as I jerked, and that's when Jacob decided to show his manhood. I looked at his angry eyes and I was scared, not because he might raise his hand to me again, but because for the first time in my life, I decided to cross what Jacob thought was a red line. I decided to go against his will, to rebel without fear of his fists. Mom had always idolized Dad, saying he was king and God to her. And she taught me to live the same way. Always shut your mouth at the right time. Mom taught me, then the family will get along. My mom wouldn't understand me right now. I can't accept Jacob like that, even though he's my son's father. She was silent, her tears preventing her from speaking, and there was nothing more to say. In the morning, while my husband slept, I packed my suitcase with my own and the children's things and left. I left the house that had long been my fortress and my golden cage at the same time, without regret. Jacob was no good ever, and the overbearing nature of his parents had left a mark on the boy's life. He always wanted to prove himself strong, self-sufficient, and all-powerful, so he asserted himself as best he could. Veronica tried not to bend under him, but she was afraid for her life and the life of the child. Are you going to divorce him? John asked. Of course. Then what are you waiting for? You write a statement and I'll take you to court. You have a minor, Tom, so you'll have to go through this unpleasant procedure. Jack, the doctor who took you to the hospital, remember? He took all the beatings, wrote up a report that you needed surgery after your husband's games. So that's what we're taking to the police. Come on, John. He's gonna kill me. No, I'll just get a divorce. Then he'll really kill you and then he'll steal Tom. Why can't I have a husband like you? Kind, sensitive, child-loving, and Veronica looked at him with adoration. I'm far from white and fluffy and never have been. I can be rude, demanding, and even harmful. And if a person is a scoundrel like your husband or Mickey, I can always find the strength to tell them to their face. So don't idealize me. Everything I do for you and Tom is entirely of my own free will, and no one would make me do it against my will. I'm no noble knight. I'm as flawed as any man, but it's fair to say that I'd never allow myself to raise a hand against a woman or hurt a child. And you're a good mother. You have a maternal warmth that attracts Tom to you, and that's wonderful. You have a night to think. Either you change your life and we go to the court and the police, or you look for an apartment and shake from every knock, waiting for the husband of a bandit. The next day was Saturday. John was not in a hurry, so breakfast was delayed. The first question he asked his guest was, of course, about her decision. What have you decided about your life? John, I was up all night. I've been thinking that if I wasn't so, how shall I put it? Don't tell me, I'll figure it out, he added with a smile. Oh, you're making it easy for me. If I wasn't like this, I could have avoided so many problems. I've made so many mistakes, and every one of them is almost fatal. Don't scare me. Fatal means there's nothing you can do about it. I think you've got it all ahead of you. Your optimism is inspiring, but I'm scared to think what's ahead of me. You're gonna have a happy life without a tyrant. Do you have a good lawyer? No, I don't see any lawyers among my acquaintances. Well, that's easily remedied. Jack's doctor has a brother who's a very good lawyer, so we'll go to him. Oh my God, it was one mistake when I agreed to sign with him. I remember his every word, how he skillfully persuaded, insisted, but I held out for a year, pulled, said that a serious step, you need to think. But on the birthday of my son, he still talked me into it. He promised me a lot, as always, but I didn't need anything he tried to give me. I told him, remember, if you raise your hand against me, you're beating your son. He agreed, and really, for 6 months or more, I was the happiest woman. But then my wishes were no longer taken into account. He reminded me that he was in charge and his wishes were the law. How he wants it to be is how it should be, and everything else is dust. Jacob is king and God. It's become an unspoken law in our family. He's older, he's more experienced, so he'll decide everything. That's how my happiness ended. If I hadn't done that stupid thing, how easy things would be now. But we are not looking for easy ways. We need to get everything in the struggle, the sweeter the victory will be. Your gullibility is both bribing and infuriating at the same time. If you didn't know him, that's one thing, but he's already shown his hands in despotism and you still believe him. Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm stupid. Remember in the difficult times, Veronica tried to realize what she had achieved by her 30th birthday. A despotic husband, a failed marriage, no job and no career, no home, no money, no nothing. So much for marital bliss. The only joy is a son. But that's a lot too, the woman reassured herself. Veronica, I love only you, Jacob tried to say softly. God, what a lie that was. Considering the constant humiliation and yelling. Do the women you love get beaten? Do the women you love get humiliated? No, no, and no. She no longer entertained the hope that her husband would ever be a better man and appreciate her. That's it. Hope was dead. Her illusions of marital happiness were gone like smoke. Veronica wanted to give him her life, but was left at a broken trough. Her marriage is a complete fiasco. Now it can be said for sure. Veronica didn't usually use profanity and had judged Diana when she used a 3-story mat before she could close her mouth. But now she was so shattered by her outcome that she mentally allowed herself to lose control of herself. John wasted no time in calling Jack and asking about Liam. Valadia, we need your Liam now. I've been waiting for that call, because after Veronica's visit to my place and the way she'd been patched up, it was unforgivable. I'll tell Keir, he'll call you." But Jacob didn't waste any time. He called everyone he knew who knew Veronica in any way, but he couldn't get anywhere in his search. Only Diana had been to this house twice, and not just to this house. Now she was calling him, whispering into the phone that she missed him. She was looser and more experienced than Veronica, but she was sticky. Jacob didn't like that, so when he saw Diana calling, he didn't answer the phone. He didn't know who else to involve in the search for Veronica. It had been 2 weeks since she and her son had been away from home. The news came from nowhere. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Victor's Day, the head of the traffic safety department, began with another disappointing report. Another traffic accident and another fatality. On the table, there were reports on accidents and traffic violations committed by drivers and analysis of the reasons for their occurrence. I decided to start with the tapes, distracted by a phone call. "Morning, Victor." He recognized his old friend Christian. He didn't like to talk to him, but he had to turn to him and he helped him. So, adjusting his voice to a friendly tone, he answered Jacob. "I'll get right to the point, knowing how busy you are." "Go ahead." "My wife disappeared 2 weeks ago. Neighbors saw her leaving with a baby and a huge suitcase. Didn't leave town by any means of transportation, so maybe you can track her." "Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to track her where? All over the city?" He was pissed at everyone, even though he knew the guy was innocent. "Why all over town?" "You know my address. Look around the roads, see if you see anything interesting." "All right. When did you say you disappeared?" 2 weeks ago?" "Yeah. You have a lot of traffic accidents there. 2 in the last 2 weeks." "Yeah, I've heard that. Well, can you help?" "I can't promise anything, but if there's anything interesting, I'll call you. I still have your number." "It's a pleasure. I'll be waiting." Veronica certainly didn't realize Jacob was getting too close. The 2 weeks Veronica and her son had been away from home, he'd been sick and twisted. He was angry at his wife, wanting to find her and punish her for everything she'd done, but on the other hand, he marveled at her courage. Mr. Christian had never thought he would long for his wife and son. The house was uncomfortable and cold without them. He feared that she had not just left him, but had gone to someone else. Could she have decided to do that? He was afraid to answer that question for himself. He was afraid that she would ask for a divorce, which of course he would not give her. Afraid to know the truth, where and with whom his Veronica was. But despite all the anger boiling in him, he had to admit to himself that he missed Veronica. He missed her as a woman. She hadn't broken, hadn't been afraid, and for that she was worth respecting, Jacob thought, angry at himself for thinking that. What was she missing? How dare she leave him with a child? He had no answers to those questions. Jacob had lived with this woman for almost 7 years, and no matter what troubles happened between them, he had grown accustomed to her and loved her. He'd been unfaithful on occasion, and what man doesn't? But male adultery is quite different from female adultery. God made men that way, there's nothing you can do about it. His face was twisted with anger, and he didn't know what he would do to her if she were home right now. Yes, he wasn't the perfect husband, he'd hurt her, it was true, but why leave? And then in the collapse of relationships and families are always guilty of both. I saw his family and parental relationships in front of me. His father had always beaten his mother in front of little Jacob. He remembered how she used to wail when her husband chased her around the room. Don't. Calm down. It was awful. He felt sorry for his mother and he stood up for her. But she wouldn't go anywhere and she wouldn't take him away from his father. And when his father died, his mother didn't cry, just stood there looking blank. The neighbors would tell her to cry. The mother looked at them and answered, "I cried all my tears when he beat me. There was nothing left." The women nodded understandingly and hugged her by the shoulders. Mother did not live long, but even the little that the Lord gave her, she walked with a smile and did not look back with fear. Those must have been the best years of her life. And his wife, what was she missing? A house full of trees, a beautiful son. You can't understand these women, Jacob thought, lying on the couch. He'd been neglecting his business a little, missing calls from his partners, Veronica on his mind. On Monday night, he got a persistent call from someone who didn't want to pick up the phone, but who wanted to talk to him. "Yeah," he barked. "Jacob? Well, who am I? To whom do I have the honor?" I'm your wife's attorney, Veronica, representing her in divorce proceedings. My name is Liam. I prepared the divorce and property division papers. You'll need to review them, consult with your attorney, and give me an answer. The terms are more than good. Your spouse isn't out to rob you." Jacob jumped up from the couch. This was a well-known and very expensive lawyer. "Where did my wife get the money to pay for your services? Is that all you're interested in? Don't you have any other questions?" the lawyer asked in surprise. "Where is my wife? I must talk to her first. I'm not authorized to give you her whereabouts. If she finds it necessary, she'll call you herself. Have a nice day." So she filed for divorce? She's offended, Jacob thought. He dialed her number, but nothing. She changed her SASIM card. He threw the phone down angrily. Liam arrived Sunday night. John went out with Tom, and Veronica had a long talk with the lawyer. He was a man about 50 years old, gray-haired, with a very soft, ingratiating voice, which disposes to a frank conversation. In a couple of hours, she laid out to him all the reasons why she no longer wanted to see her husband. "I hate him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to live in the same house. I despise him as a man and I want nothing to do with him. Let him sign all the papers and give me a divorce. I'd like to part with him in a good way. Maybe you should think about it. You have a child, a boy. He needs a father. And if his father disgusts me, shouldn't the child see happy parents? He'll only learn to beat women and hate his father. I won't stop them seeing each other, but I won't live with him. You're a determined woman, and you're tough on your husband. Every word you say is a sharp knife. If he heard you, he'd be hurt and offended," said Liam. "Nothing. For his cheating and his abusive behavior, he deserves it. I lived with that monster for 7 years. He's broken all my wings. I'm an unhappy woman," Veronica confessed to the lawyer and cried. "Only my son was a ray of light in that dark kingdom. Only by looking at him could I live in his father's house. But recent events have put an end to our family relationship. The limit of my patience is over. I want a divorce, and let him live as he wants and with whom he wants. He's always had a lot of women. He's never had enough of me." Liam looked at Veronica in her sad eyes and added, "Everything will be as you want it to be. Don't worry about it." Tuesday morning, he got a call from Victor. "Jacob, come over. I have an interesting movie for you." I drove in with a whistle of tires. His tank took off. Jacob was in such a hurry that he was literally flying to meet Liam. He ran into the office, forgetting to say hello, and asked, "Did you find her?" "You'll see for yourself, but the big suitcase and the little boy are present." "That's her," said the man with the abnormally shiny eyes. "You sit down and calm down. Otherwise, I won't show you anything. Take a sip of water." Jacob took a deep breath, drank some water, and really calmed down. "Is that it? Are you okay?" "Yeah, sorry." "Look," and he turned the display to him. Looking carefully at what was happening on the screen, he recognized Veronica at once, but when she fell, he even flinched. "What's wrong with her?" he asked Liam. "I don't know. Keep looking." The traffic resumed, and a young man got out of one car, lifted Veronica in his arms and carried her into the cabin, then took the suitcase, put it in the trunk, and put Tom in the back seat. He slammed the door shut and drove away. Jacob sat there, unable to say a word. Where was he taking her? Hospital, I think. There are 2 clinics along that road. You'll have no trouble finding out if she's there or not. Here's the license plate number of the rescuer. That's John. They own a company called Confronting, and this is his address. Look for your fugitive if she wants to come back to you. She's my wife, and she should live where her husband lives. I agree, only she doesn't think so because she hasn't come back yet. Maybe she's in the hospital, unconscious, but she's got her papers on her. I think so, and the baby would have been returned to you. The police would have found you, I'm sure of it." Jacob was sad, but he didn't forget to say thank you. "I'd owe you one. You want me to pay you back with money?" "No, I don't need money. If there's a problem, I'll come to you. It's a deal." He found the clinic where Veronica spent a week. They called the doctor Jack. "Hello," Jacob said, smiling sweetly. He obviously wanted the doctor to like him. Jack knew immediately who was in front of him. "What can I do for you? You had Veronica here a while back. I know who you're talking about. Who are you? And what are you interested in?" Jacob cheered up. The doctor was clearly in a good mood to talk to him. "I'm Christiane's husband. I'm interested in what happened to her and where she is now." "I don't know where she is now because I'm a doctor, not a policeman. You'll tell me what happened to her now." "Go ahead." "I have nothing to tell you except that she ran away from me 2 weeks ago with the baby." "That's it?" "Well, yes. What else did you want me to tell you? How many people raped her?" Jacob looked startled at the doctor. "What are you talking about?" "She had multiple lacerations. She was patched up, pieced together. All the beatings were removed, every bruise was recorded, and a doctor's report was written on the woman's condition after the surgery. I advised her to go to the police with these documents. I think they'll be interested in you. Any other questions for me?" "No." And the doctor left without saying goodbye. Mr. Christian didn't expect such a turn of events. When he left the clinic, he called his friend at the police station. "Valera, it's me. Did they say you filed a report against me?" "Yes, yesterday." "Why would you call me?" "You understand, I had it in my hands for 2 hours and they took it to the prosecutor's office. It's a very serious and competent document. The doctor's report is written to the letter. There's nothing to fault. Every bruise you gave her has been photographed. It's over, Jacob." "What does that mean?" "It means you're looking at a very serious charge of spousal rape from 8 and up." "Do you have anyone in the DA's office?" "No, but even if I did, I wouldn't be asking for that kind of a charge. I suggest you make a deal with your wife. Kneel on your feet, apologize, and if she takes the complaint, you're lucky." He hung up without saying goodbye. Clearly, Veronica's got John's help. He can't forgive me for trying to ruin him. "Okay, I'm not proud," soothed himself. A man can and lie on his feet, but the divorce will not give. With these thoughts, he went to John's address. Having called, he waited for the guard to open the gate, but the gate didn't open, only a small intercom window. "Who do you want?" "I'm looking for Veronica and my son Tom." "We don't have those. This is John's house and he hasn't had visitors in years." My nerves were on edge. "Open up, you thug," Jacob shouted, pounding his fist on the massive gate. But the guard didn't even bat an eye, just slammed the window shut. Veronica and Tom were gone. John had moved them into his one-room city apartment, which had been empty since he moved out of town. That's what the lawyer said. "It's wrong for you to hide it in your house. You could get in trouble. Move it to your apartment, and if they ask, say they're renting it. I'd even draw up a contract and put a price on it. You don't have to take the money, but it's the right thing to do." John did what Liam said. Jacob didn't want to leave John's house, where he thought his wife and baby were hidden. He waited until evening, but there was only one owner at the house. No one had come out of the house. Could they really not be here? Then where? Where should I go to look for them? I absolutely have to talk to Veronica. I'm sure I can convince her to take the application, Jacob thought as he drove up to the house. He'd been out of the office all day again, ignoring calls from work again. All his thoughts on his wife and child. All week he'd been driving to John's house, but all to no avail. If I don't find him by Monday, I'll hire a private investigator. He had more experience and more time. Jacob partly understood his wife. He heard her. He'd raised his hand to her on more than one occasion. Veronica decided to get revenge, punish him for all his tears. She was trying to numb the pain that was tearing her up inside. He could certainly ask for forgiveness, even give himself and her his word, but he wasn't sure if he could change his behavior. This is the way he's used to living. This is how his father lived. This is how the neighbors lived. He did not say it was right, but seeing it from childhood, he could not change himself. After the birth, his wife blossomed. She became seductive. All the men who came to visit him looked at her, but she got her way. He was driving along the central street of the city and thought about how to fix the situation. Standing under a traffic light, he looked around and saw his Veronica, his son in the company of John. How to get out of the car, he didn't know. There was a huge tail behind him and everyone was honking. He rounded the corner and jumped out of the car. He tried not to lose sight of them. When he saw the two of them, he felt a lump in his throat. The fuses blew all at once, and it was impossible to contain himself. They looked like family. Not a single thought in his head, only rage, anger, and spite, which were bad counselors. He couldn't feel his own body. It was as if it had atrophied. Pulling himself together, he ran across the road and followed them into the mall. He didn't find them right away. They were sitting in a cafe drinking coffee. Tom was having a brownie. "Hello, son." Daddy shouted the child and ran to him, and his arms spread apart. Veronica immediately stood up. She was afraid he would carry him away. But Jacob wasn't going to make her angry. On the contrary, he wanted to show with all his behavior that he wouldn't do anything bad. "Hello, Veronica. I've been looking for you. I missed you so much. We need to talk. I'm not going anywhere with you." "All right, let's sit here at the table and talk." John didn't interfere as long as Jacob was behaving appropriately. He knew they had to talk anyway. "Veronica, you two talk here, and Tom and I will go to the game room." "Okay, just not for long." During those 2 weeks, her husband had become a complete stranger to her. She didn't even want to look at him. "How are you feeling?" Jacob asked with concern. "You make it sound like you're mocking me." "Veronica, I'm sorry. I was out of line, but to be honest, I don't remember much from that night." "That doesn't excuse you, and I'm not going to forgive you. I almost died after your games. I can't see you." Jacob could barely contain himself. He'd never let anyone talk to him like that. Men were afraid of him. Girls looked up to him with adoration, and his wife couldn't find the words. "I filed for divorce. This time it's serious, and I'm not backing down." "How are you going to live? Is this the one you're hoping for?" And he nodded at John. "I've never relied on anyone, just myself. If you remember, I was working and making a good living. I'll go back to the fashion house, and Tom will go to daycare like all the other kids. We'll manage." "You shouldn't do that, Veronica. I love you." "That's a strange kind of love you got there, Jacob. You beat me, you raped me. You don't let me out of the house. You don't let me talk to my girlfriends. You don't let me work. You don't confuse the two. Is that what you call love?" "Love is different. No one said it would be easy to live with me. It's easy to love when things are good. You try to keep your feelings alive when things are a mess. Forgiveness is hard, but if you want to keep your family together." She didn't let him finish. "I don't want to, not at all. When I think of your fists, my whole body hurts. I've heard a lot that the key to family happiness is to accept a man as he is, not trying to subjugate him to suit your whims. That's hard, but you've never been able to do it, and more importantly, you've never wanted to. So let's end this conversation. You're gonna work this out with my lawyer." "Do you want money for a lawyer?" "No, I can handle it on my own." That John promised to help. "John saved me from dying. No one stopped for a car. He came out and helped me. So you should be thanking him, not bankrupting his firm." "What did you complain about?" "No, I was just comparing the facts." "Well, if you've made up your mind and I can't seem to talk you into it, then I have a condition. I'll give you a divorce and agree to everything your lawyer tells me if you drop the police report. And if I don't, then this divorce case will drag on for years." "It won't drag on for years. You'll go to jail, and I'll divorce you without your consent. Understand?" She was about to get up to leave when he tugged her arm roughly, pulling her back into the chair. "You will do as I tell you. I can't believe you're gonna let a kid have a black spot on his record. I mean, any decent organization is gonna have to show the father and mother. You don't care how your son is viewed. I don't think he'll thank you for it." Veronica thought for a moment. "I'll go to the child and think about your proposal in peace. How do I get in touch with you?" "Your lawyer will contact you. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Veronica. I'm not so easy to get rid of." "Oh, I don't need to be reminded of that." And she ran to the second floor to find Tom and John. "Where's Daddy?" the child asked when he saw only Mommy. "He went to work." "When are we going home?" Veronica looked at John for support, but he preferred not to interfere in family matters. "You'll have to decide that for yourselves," John replied to her pleading look. "Do you miss Daddy?" "Yes." Veronica didn't know what the right thing to do was, so she called Liam. "I wanted to consult with you." "Don't do it over the phone. I'll come over." "Okay." After her meeting with Jacob, Veronica began to have thoughts. She kept coming back to the life she led with her almost ex-husband, and the more she thought about it, the more panic overwhelmed her. What would her son say to her when he grew up? "Why did you deprive me of my father?" What will she say to him? Tell them how he beat her, or worse, raped her? She would start pacing the apartment, rubbing her temples with trembling hands. The child misses her father. Does she have the right to put him away for a long time, a very long time, and Tom? Will he ask her again when they go home to Daddy? Everything had been so easy before this meeting, and after talking to Jacob, there were more questions. Her insides twisted at the thought of Jacob's satisfied face and the smug look he'd thrown at his rebellious wife. But she could handle it because she wasn't alone. The main thing was that she'd had the strength to leave, or she'd have lost herself. Anything can happen in life. You can lose everything in a moment, but losing yourself is the worst. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm stuffed up. I don't see my happiness, a spoiled girl to her rich husband, but how scary it is to have everything and not feel happy. She was ready to give the appearance of this happiness for a small apartment, the opportunity to work and be near her son, or maybe to hell with those thoughts. She tried to push them away, tired of them. Glancing at her watch, Veronica waited for the lawyer. The doorbell rang only 2 hours later. Sorry, Veronica, I'm late. Traffic was terrible. Well, thank you for coming. I've been waiting for you. Now I can't take a step without your advice. Calm down and tell me. He realized from her frightened eyes that Jacob had found her and was probably intimidating her. How did he find you? How did you know? I guess from your condition. I don't know. We were with Tom and John at the mall and he came up. He was trying to be very nice and peaceful, but I saw something in his eyes that others didn't. He was staring at me from the corner of his eye, like a beast. Anger, hatred, rage, those feelings that sizzle him. He said to take the statement from the police and then he'd agree to all our terms, and if I didn't, he'd make the divorce last for years. He's bluffing. If you don't take the statement, he'll get time served and you'll divorce him quietly. That's what I told him, but he frightened me that it would be a black mark on Tom's record. His father's an ex-con, and he might not get a good job. And then Tom threw himself into his arms, and now he's asking me when we're going home to Dad. So I'm confused. What do I do, Lion? Whatever we decide to do is what we do. Don't take anything. You burn your bridges. You don't want to go back. You of all people know this man. If you show him you have any doubts, or worse, fear, he'll never let you live. That's not what I'm worried about. In court, there may be a question of how you're going to provide for the child. You don't have a job. You don't have a place to live. Those are all arguments against you. So only the father can bring him up. He's got great facilities, money. It turns out he's an eligible groom, mansion, business, good looks. It's all in his favor. The court can give him a reprieve. What am I supposed to do? Get a job right away. Put Tom in daycare. The apartment will be rented for now, but it's available. Otherwise, there will be problems. If the kindergarten is a problem, I'll help you. Okay, I'll call work tomorrow. I think it won't be a problem. He was tired today. He had one more difficult case to finish, but it was a lot of sweat. That's why Liam felt like he'd been drained. You're tired, Liam. Why don't I buy you some borscht? Tom praised me today. Did he? Well, then I'm in. The lawyer left an hour later, leaving Veronica to ponder. In the morning, she called the fashion house, but unfortunately, they were short-staffed and turned her down. It was a blow. She couldn't believe that there was no room for her where she had worked for several years. It was morning on the clock, and she no longer had any energy. It was as if she was being forced to unload rail cars. The fact that she wasn't being hired ruined her already bad mood. She called the model home again. It's me again. I'm sorry to interrupt you from work. Maybe you know who meets clothes demonstrators. Veronica, I really don't. You're a good worker. I'm sorry to turn you down, but I can't just fire someone for your past performance. You took a long time to get ready. I'm sorry, and she hung up. Veronica cried, and covering her eyes with her palms, collapsed on the couch. She felt cornered. Nothing was working out for her. It was painful, hurtful, and she thought, unfair. And what are you so snotty about? The inner voice said. Is this a time to feel sorry for yourself? You're a fashion designer. Pull yourself together. Get your laptop and look. She jumped up. Tom was standing beside her and he was sniffling too. Mommy, why are you crying so loud? Are you scared? I'm sorry, sweetie. I just remembered something sad. She wiped her tears, titting her hair as if someone could see her and open her laptop. Despite her hysterics, despite her resentment that she couldn't do anything, after sitting at the laptop for 2 hours, She found a job opening at a sewing factory and called immediately. Yes, we need a fashion designer. Do you have any experience? Veronica had nothing to say. I graduated from college as a fashion designer. I have my own work experience. How many years ago? Maybe I'd better come. I see. No experience. You graduated from college about 10 years ago. She didn't specify how long, because the woman was right. She's got nothing. No career, no family. Young lady, are you still here? The woman on the other end of the line asked. Yes. Come by tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Bring your work. See you tomorrow. She didn't hope for anything. Even on a penny like that, the administration wanted someone with experience. In the morning, having collected Tom, at 9 o'clock sharp, they stood at the gatehouse. A pass was issued in Veronica's name and she entered the factory. The woman with whom she had spoken yesterday turned out to be a petite brunette, very pleasant looking. Who's that mommy's ponytail? She said to the child. I'm not a ponytail, I'm Tom. Will you go to work with him too? The woman asked sternly. No. The kindergarten is quarantined for the time being, but soon it will be open for children. Well, let's see your work, and you want to talk to the head of the experimental shop. It's our main department. It is there that new models of future clothes are developed. There we have modelers, designers, technologists who make samples of models. Finished her story, Megan. That was the name of this sociable woman. She opened a large folder with models and looked at Veronica. The patterns are old. We made them 5 years ago. Do you have any newer ideas? I have ideas. I just haven't had time to realize them, Veronica said in a high-pitched voice. Megan took her to the shop manager. Edward, here Veronica is the new girl. I told you about her yesterday. Will you talk to her? Yes, I would like to. In front of her stood a young man, blonde, with blue eyes and a dimple on his chin. He was a little taller than Veronica. Come in, he invited her, letting her into the office. They talked for about half an hour and the boss agreed to take her on a 1-month probationary period. Our team is young, not afraid to put forward bold ideas, so we keep up with the times. I will be glad if you will settle in and will be useful to our factory. I'll do my best. Tomorrow to the personnel department and get to work. Veronica had been working at the factory for a month. She didn't like the work. It wasn't her job to design models, but she was good at it. Tom went to a private kindergarten a stone's throw from home. She rarely saw John, mostly on phone calls. Several times she'd been called in to speak to an investigator and Liam had accompanied his client. He was so experienced, never let his client know offense. The investigators sometimes got lost talking to her. A month later, Veronica got a call from Nino. Veronica, have you found a job? Yes, I work as a fashion designer. And why these questions? Will you come back to us? Diana got fired. She showed up drunk at a fashion show a week ago. We didn't see her. She fell down on the runway. It was a scandal. And yours was in the front row watching. Are they with Diana? You didn't know? No, but I don't care. We're getting divorced. So you're coming. I'm afraid to quit. What if you forgive her and I have to leave? And no one will hire me here. No, don't worry. The director won't take her back. She's not a bad girl, but she's got no brakes. We're expecting you tomorrow. The feeling was twofold. On the one hand, she was glad that she was going to do what she liked, but on the other hand, she was uncomfortable in front of Edward because she had just started working and Jacob would be after her again. But Veronica wanted to go back to her old job. She felt she belonged here and her earnings allowed her to live without counting pennies. Well, we have no right to keep you. I can only wish you all the best, said the foreman, and they said goodbye. In the morning, Veronica was in a great mood. Now everything will get better, thought the woman. They were in a hurry with their son to work, he to kindergarten and she to the fashion house. Sitting in the bus and watching what was happening outside the window, she smiled. She was distracted from her pleasant thoughts by a phone call. It was John. Good morning. Hi. I'm on my way to work at the fashion house. Can you believe it? Diane got fired for misconduct. She heard John laughing. Why are you laughing? That's what you get fired for. She came to work drunk, Veronica said in a whisper. Did you think carefully before you agreed? You mean Jacob? That's right. I thought about it. What am I supposed to do now? Hide? Go to a job I don't like? Is that what you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that you think carefully before you do anything. You're responsible for the baby, and he hung up. John shouted Veronica, apparently so loudly that the passengers looked back at her. She got there quickly. With a sinking heart, Veronica opened the familiar door and walked into the lobby, where she was enveloped by such a familiar smell. The guards greeted her and smiled, so they hadn't forgotten. The girls hugged her and tried to touch her. Veronica looks away embarrassed, clutching her bag. She's in her element. As she approached the principal's office, she bumped into Diana. She was in tears and looked at Veronica like an enemy of the people. You waited? If I hadn't snapped, you wouldn't be here. Quiet, quiet, but you're a mean one. Jacob raised you right. You put a man like that in jail. She sniffled and walked away. What did she just say? The kind of man Jacob put away, the kind of man he took into custody. And she dialed a lawyer. Liam, what about Jacob? What about him? He's in lockup where he belongs. If you're going to withdraw your statement, you can find another lawyer right away. I don't work with kamikazes. No, I just found that out by accident. That's why I called you to check. I'm working at the fashion house again as of today. I was afraid Jacob would come after me. Don't worry, you can work in peace. Even though he knew someone in the prosecutor's office, they couldn't help him. But your Jacob tried very hard. He's not mine, and he'll never be mine again. I like your attitude. After talking to the lawyer, I was in a life is good and living is good mood. There was peace inside. Now she could live her life without looking back. Great. Her life began to change the minute she was free of Jacob. This was the relief she had dreamed of all 6 years. Jacob was no longer her problem. Finally, she walked into the principal's office. Nothing had changed here, except that Elizabeth had gotten a little chin over the years, but she was still dressed smartly and tastefully. Veronica walked forward a little, eyeing Elizabeth. Her pink lips stretched into a smile, clearly pleased to see Veronica here again. Are you happy? She started the first conversation. You're in great shape, as always, she said, looking her over from head to toe. Yes, I'm happy to be back at home. Shall we sign the contract? Are you ready? I'm ready. She went to a few more interviews, had to see Jacob. But with a lawyer by her side, she felt very confident. At the trial, Mr. Christian behaved abominably. He kept trying to accuse Veronica of cheating on him. She's even living in his apartment now, even though she's still my wife. Your honored counselor, she rents this apartment. Here's the lease, here are the receipts. But this is John's apartment. But she has the right to rent any apartment, especially since this one is cheaper. She lived in his house while I was looking for her all over the city, shouted at the Hall-X. She wasn't just living, she was between life and death, beaten and raped. As soon as she got better, Veronica left and has been living on her own for a long time. After being beaten for all of 6+ years, it's a wonder she didn't become disabled, finished the lawyer. Jacob and Christian had 2 attorneys and they earned their bread honestly. The trial was postponed 3 times at the request of the accused, and they even managed to reduce the sentence by 3 years. The sentence was read for about an hour and Mr. Christian received 9 years in a strict regime colony. She breathed the air of freedom, and her heart missed John. But that's another story.
Anthony stopped paying due attention to his wife a long time ago. He looked more and more at other women and girls, allowing himself to sit with the men over beer. What can I say? The man was all like his grandfather and father, former immigrants from a distant village who lived in fishing and hunting. And even after moving to the city and marrying a city girl, Anthony did not give up his habits. This, of course, always infuriated Barbara. What can I do? She complained to her only friend and neighbor Sophie, an old teacher and Jewish woman, who it is unknown how she ended up in this city, and on what means she lived is unclear. But why do you think so? You are a smart, intelligent woman, a primary school teacher. And you say that. Don't I understand? It is you, Sophie, who have children and grandchildren who will stand up for you. On the other hand, who will stand up for me. Understand I'm an orphan, and thanks for that I was able to learn with my own head. And if Anthony chases me, then where should I go? To the old room? You're just afraid of difficulties. That's understandable. But then see for yourself. Anthony is a bore and an ignoramus. Ill-mannered, but on the other hand, they are all like that. Was it really possible that your late husband cheated? Barbara looked at her neighbor in surprise. I thought mine wasn't walking when I was carrying our first and second babies under my heart. I was walking. Just remember, Barbara, some walk wisely, while others, like yours, put it on display for everyone to see. Sophie, does everyone really know now that he has a mistress? The neighbor smiled sadly, looked at poor Barbara, and stroked her hand. Barbara, just come to terms with it, and think about how you can give birth to a baby. How long have you been together? In a few years. But it just doesn't work out. Yes, I haven't tried anything. I went to see doctors and sorcerers, but everything doesn't work out. The doctor says that the problem may be in the husband himself. Well, how do you find out? You can't ask him this directly. Knowing your husband's tough temper, I dare to assume that such a conversation will end in good hassle. Well, on the other hand, how to check? You really can't give him a mistress. If she got pregnant, that means the reason is you. At least on the other hand, he may leave for her if his mistress carries a child from him. And men are so unpredictable. No, Anthony won't leave. His father won't let him. Are you sure about this, Barbara? The woman nodded her head affirmatively, wiping away accumulated tears with a handkerchief. She had confidence in her father-in-law. It was he who found Barbara for his son, introduced him, and forced him to marry when he found out that they were dating and even intended to live together. Then he threatened his son that, if he divorced Barbara, he would not see the inheritance of his own ears. And there was a considerable inheritance there, as the woman herself believed. Well, what if your mistress gets pregnant? What happens? He won't abandon his child, his dear one. He won't abandon him. He will pay child support. And then, if anything happens, he will arrange guardianship. He is especially if there is an heir, he will break anyone's head for him. And the mistress will not agree to blackmail. My hand is strong, and if anything happens, it can burn you. Yes, he's a tough guy. Okay, see for yourself, but by the way, I have a couple of friends here. They went to visit a knowledgeable grandmother. If anything, I ask her address. Thank you, Sophie, you will always listen to me and console me. Nothing, neighbor. What can you do? This is our lot. If you need anything, get back to me. The neighbor left, and Barbara sat for a long time at the kitchen table in the empty 3-room apartment that Anthony's parents gave them for their wedding. And I thought and thought and thought and thought and couldn't come up with anything worthwhile. She understood that her husband was walking, and there was strong evidence for this. What can I do? Is it true? Shouldn't we put Flyagorix in his borscht so that he doesn't go for a walk? But the woman did not know how far her relationship with the beauty went, who came to their city to work as an agronomist and part-time accountant at a large woodworking enterprise. It was there that her husband worked as a mechanic, and she worked as a primary school teacher. How good you are today. Look what I brought you. And Anthony handed the woman a luxurious necklace made of natural pearls of dark blue, almost black color. Oh, Anthony, where did you get such beauty from? And what will your wife say to all this? What will she say? Nothing. I bought the same one for her too. So there's nothing to be offended by. But if you don't love her, then why are you still with her? The woman cunningly tried to find out what was going on in his house. My grandfather is on Barbara's side, and he said that if I divorced, I would be disinherited. And there, believe me, there is something to fight for. Come on, you're agile and young. Arms and legs, like everything else, are there. You can earn money on the spot. And with a laugh, she grabbed him by the place of origin. Jadwiga didn't want to miss out on Anthony. What if the wife finds out about us? The accountant gently wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his chin. Nothing will happen, he will cry, that's all. Anthony was sure that this would happen. Even if we come to your house together? Jadwiga specifically emphasized the word your home while observing the reaction. Yours. Jadwiga, what are you talking about? What are you trying to achieve? When we started dating, we discussed this point. Don't touch your wife, you and I live separately. And she waits for me at home and cooks soups for me. Well, at least invite me to dinner? Or didn't I even earn that? Anthony, with a dissatisfied look, threw her hands off his shoulders and pulled away. He was already starting to get tired of this conversation. Okay, that's it. I have to go. Lunch was almost over, and I still hadn't had lunch. At the mere mention of homemade soup, Anthony felt a queasy feeling in his stomach and an urgent growl in his stomach. His Barbara's soup was always rich and delicious. Even my mother had never cooked something so delicious. So that means you don't love me? Jadwiga wailed in her polish and turned theatrically to the window, covering her face with her hands. Don't cry. I'll be back soon. In the meantime, it's time to work. Anthony quickly left the accountant's office and met his father nose to nose on the threshold. Dad, what are you doing here? His surprise knew no bounds. Yes, I decided to check on you, son. Your mother went home with Barbara to visit you. And I'm here, and I see that you've found yourself a new mistress. The man nodded at the sign hanging on the door of the accountant's office, Jadwiga Volchek. He looked at his son reproachfully, trying not to give him a ringing slap in the face. After all, this is not how he and his mother raised him. Oh, not like that. Bruno, although he came from the outback and had considerable health and masculine strength, never cheated on his wife. Yes, in my youth I had no hobbies, but when I got married I completely swore off cheating. But the son apparently didn't follow suit. He doesn't want to settle down. What are you talking about, Dad? I found out about salaries and bonuses. Do you really think everything is the worst? Oh, there's no need to tell me fairy tales. You reek of women's perfume a kilometer away. He shook his finger at him. Bruno wanted to say that he would sign over all his property to Barbara, but he lost his tongue just in time. It was not worth it to set up a woman like this ahead of time. Otherwise, you never know what would hit his fool in the head. Dad, for Barbara, I'll rip out anyone's throat, and she's my wife before people and God. Okay, at least you understand this. Okay, let's go home. I asked the director for you. My mother and I have a conversation with you. Anthony nodded and obediently followed his father. And Jadwiga stood under the door and heard it all perfectly. No, she didn't eavesdrop. It was just that the men spoke so loudly, openly, that everything could be heard perfectly behind the flimsy door. What now? All I can do is enjoy his caresses. He will never leave her, and a stingy tear rolled down her pretty face. Yes, what can I say? The woman was simply catastrophically unlucky. She didn't find a husband in her homeland, couldn't start a relationship, and there were only potential candidates for lovers. And so that someone would take them and ask them to marry. They simply weren't there. All the men passed by. Sometimes they stayed in her life longer, sometimes just for the night. Others spoke about her beauty, others about a woman's intelligence. Well, what does it matter to her? No family, no child, nothing. Jadwiga increasingly began to think about not just marrying Anthony, but having a baby with him. She knew from her lover that they had no children, but this family apparently had amassed enormous wealth. And maybe it's true. Follow your grandmother's advice and give birth to a boy or girl. Let it be a joy. Grandma, but how can I give birth? I've already tried and can't get pregnant. Maybe you can tell me what. And your boyfriend, does he have children? Or maybe infertile? This is important, granddaughter. Yes, it seems like he and his wife have no children. But on the side he said that there was a boy and a girl. And she might be lying. He's not lying, said the grandmother, laying out the cards on the table and looking at Anthony's fate. You know, my girl, I'll tell you one thing, that you shouldn't be together. But if you are thinking of giving birth to him, give birth. The baby will be nice, and his destiny will be wonderful. Granny, are you sure about this? Jadwiga looked carefully at the old woman who was smoking a pipe and looked at her granddaughter with a smile. Don't doubt it, I definitely see it. And my cards don't lie. The heredity there is good, and his relatives are rich. If they like their grandson, consider that a well-fed life is guaranteed for you. Jadwiga thought for a minute and began to finger her ancient rosary, mentally calculating each option. But then the grandmother took her word. Don't doubt it, you'll get more than you do now. The main thing is to conceive this child on your Anthony's marital bed in his home. Grandma, well, this is already. Don't think about it, do as I say, and everything will be good for you. Now go, I need to rest. Come tomorrow, I'll give you the collection. Just add it to your little man's food, and that's it. Consider it done. Oh God, thought Jadwiga, sitting behind the wheel of her car and heading towards the city. And why did she manage to go to her grandmother in the village for advice? Well, what can she advise? Herbs, rituals. Yes, in our age of technology and numbers, even though the very thought of the family's wealth haunted her. Maybe it's really worth thinking about the grandmother's words and not giving up on her plan? The woman turned the key in the ignition and pressed the gas pedal. The car let out a loud animal roar and took off, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Barbara had been studying with her students since the very morning. The woman was happy when she gave all of herself to the children, and they pleased her not only with good grades, but also with their attention and love. But even today, Barbara more and more often returned her thoughts to yesterday's event, the arrival of Anthony's parents. They arrived and brought a bunch of gifts and local delicacies, but it was Anthony's mother who started the conversation with her, which alarmed and impressed this woman. Yes, it's understandable old people always wanted grandchildren, but she and her husband live for so long and nothing comes of it. This frightened her at first, then made her despondent, but now Barbara has simply resigned herself to it. They gave me an address here, and I strongly advise you to go to it. The woman handed her a piece of paper on which the address of one village was written in beautiful handwriting. Wow. Judging by the name, it is somewhere on the border with Romania or Poland. Barbara.
Yes. Did you understand everything correctly? This is the address of a healer. And by the way, she helped many of my friends. Because Barbara, my advice to you, if you want kids, go to her. If not, then I'm sorry. I tried to do the best, otherwise, God forbid, he will find a woman on the side and make her a child. And what's next?
Barbara was sitting on a chair, crumpling a napkin in her hand and nervously biting her lips. She understood perfectly well how right her mother-in-law was, and if no measures are taken, the husband may simply leave. But you are an educated woman. How can you believe in all these superstitions? These superstitions, as you say, my dear, have helped me more than once to return my husband to the family, to give birth to a son, and to do many other things with the help of the most ordinary herbs and words. Don't underestimate this power. And what do you have to lose? Nothing at all, Barbara thought to herself, wiped away her tears and looked carefully at the piece of paper. And I'll tell Anthony that you'll come to rest with me. So don't worry about my son. Barbara mentally nodded her head and agreed. In the evening, lying in bed, she returned to this conversation over and over again. Anthony did not come home, and since his parents arrived, he spends the night in the garage. To all the questions why, he answered sharply that he did not intend to listen to his parents' moral teachings, so he would simply live in the garage. It's good that at least I come home for dinner, and you cook your own signature soup. Barbara smiled and nodded her head to her husband, because she knew perfectly well that he simply adores her signature dish and cannot live without it. He even once jokingly said that if they separated, he would definitely come to her for dinner. Anthony, what makes you think that I will have a new husband? Do I need you and only you? Yes, that's me, by the way. This was at the very beginning of their relationship. But now the issue with the children has become so urgent that even her signature dish is not able to save the rapidly sinking marriage. Okay, maybe it's good, but the face is not at home. It will be possible to pay attention to his parents and calmly think about the words of his mother-in-law, in whose person she found an assistant. Yeah, what if he really took a mistress? And the garage is just a go-ahead. Barbara turned over on her side and then simply got out of bed and began to walk around the room. She was truly tormented by doubts, but what could she do? She was distracted from her sad thoughts by a quiet knock on the door. Barbara, aren't you sleeping? The mother-in-law's voice was quiet so as not to wake up her already sleeping husband. No, Mary, come in. I heard you spinning around from the next room. And now you are pacing the room. Are you still thinking about my words or whether Anthony has found someone else? Both. It's all somehow intertwined into a ball. And to be honest, I can't figure it out. Everything is going so smoothly with you and your husband. Hey, no, honey, now we've gotten used to each other. And in his youth, my Nicholas was very wayward and violent. Do you know what guys from the outback are like in this regard? Jealous and free at the same time. Do not, you know. Maybe even good. Anthony is ours, one might say almost urban. Not too rowdy. But according to your Nicholas, you wouldn't say that he is so violent. Oh, take my word for it. If you looked at the wrong person, you'll get a slap in the face. The dress was shorter than it was supposed to be. It could have been pulled by the hair. Not to mention wearing makeup to work, especially to the store. It even got to the point that one day he cut my hair. Imagine. Are you kidding? Barbara listened and couldn't believe it all. It was so. A friend invited me to her wedding, and Nicholas was in town then. Imagine someone told him that your wife not only came to the wedding in a new dress, but also braided her hair with ribbons. So he flew in like crazy, grabbed a sickle and cut off my braid with ribbons right at the back of my head. I then roared over my braid, and it was a noble one, as thick as my arm. I raised her from a very young age. I hope Anthony won't be like that. Don't worry about it. By the way, my grandmother also helped people, which is why she helped pacify my Nicholas's temper and give birth to Anthony. Don't look. I didn't immediately carry a little one under my heart, probably in the 5th year of marriage. And now I want to help you too. But why? Why do you need this? Then, for my Anthony, I want the best wife and daughter-in-law. And that's who you are. After all, you never know what kind of bitch would covet her husband as much as our wealth. Believe me, I've seen more than one of these. But this is so lyrics and romances. Now, don't think. Better put on your robe and let's go to the kitchen to drink tea. I brought one wonderful collection. It will help improve your sleep and calm your nerves. 2 women were sitting in the kitchen by candlelight and drinking tea. They chatted like old friends. And who would have thought that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law could get along so well? Nobody. The next day, early in the morning, Mary dialed her son and, in the tone of a gallant commander, clearly said, "Anthony, are you coming home for breakfast?" Apparently, the son said that he had already had breakfast. That's why she immediately posed the next question. "By the way, I need Barbara. And I'm temporarily taking her from your family nest. I hope not for long. Don't worry, son, you won't be left an orphan without food. I want to send the girl to a resort for a couple of days to relax." Well, with your commanding tone, how can anyone argue with you? Take it. And let Barbara rest as much as she wants. That's what we decided on. Well, Barbara, now you are free like a bird for a few days, or even a week. By the way, if necessary, I will help you apply for sick leave at work. Yes, in principle, it's not worth it. We have summer and holidays. True, first graders sometimes attend after-school classes, but due to the accumulated weekends and days off, I can find time during the week. But what will I tell her? I have never communicated with such people. Nothing. You just come to her, and then she will do everything herself. There are rumors about her that the old woman sees everything. Barbara took a sip of aromatic tea and looked carefully at her mother-in-law, trying to understand and accept everything she was saying. Don't worry, you'll find her right away. Within a few days, Barbara packed a small bag and called a taxi that took her to the station. Standing on the platform, she kept thinking, is she doing the right thing? Yes, maybe it's true, Mary. It's better to do it and regret it than not to do it and rack your brains over the missed chance. Yes, don't doubt it, you're doing everything right. The young voice of a handsome boy sounded right next to her ear, and Barbara jerked in surprise. Sorry if I scared you. Do you need help with things? Yes, I would be grateful. Are you in this carriage? Yes, 13th place. Wow, a damn dozen. But you are coming with us, dear lady, and our cheerful company will entertain you all the way, if you don't mind. Yes, of course, I don't mind. Give me your bag. And the guy helped her bring her things to her place and sat her down when the cheerful company of young guys began to take their places. Barbara looked carefully at the cheerful guys who were apparently going on a camping trip. You are probably going on a hike? Barbara carefully inserted her word into the conversation of the young people. Well, how can I say a hike? We fifth-year students are studying the culture of one fascinating region on the border of 3 cultures. And so we go to the village. We will collect local stories, ethnic groups, songs, as they say, the culture of the local indigenous population, and the 3 nationalities living in this region. Or rather, within the framework of one very interesting village for us. How amazing. This means that God himself sent you to me. I am also going to this village. At that moment, the conductor looked into their compartment and sweetly asked if they needed a bed and whether they should serve tea. Yes, "Dear girl," said Barbara. "Serve it. In the meantime, in return I treated you to a pie from my grandmother." "Oh, thank you. This will be for dinner. And by the way, as you understand it, you are traveling in compartments for everyone? We arrive in the morning, almost before dawn. Don't worry, I'll wake you up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll bring bed linen and tea later." The conductor left, and the company continued to settle down in its places. Yes, God sent me these young people. It will be fun to ride. And if anything happens, they will show you what and where on the spot. But how to start an interrupted conversation, Barbara thought. But then the young man himself took the conversation in the right direction. "What is your name?" "Here I am, Oleg. And you, as I understand it, are going with us to the same village." "I am Barbara, as the Georgian queen, and apparently I am going with you." "Affairs?" "Yes, there is one thing. I think you will also find it interesting." "Wow. We are directly pursued by success all the way to this region," Oleg said confidently, and he sat down more comfortably, preparing to listen. "Apparently you have something to tell us." "Yes, they told me that there is in this village, somewhere even on its outskirts, an old woman who seems to be a healer, herbalist and witch all rolled into one. Young people, I just ask you not to laugh, but I need to get to her." "Wow. It's as if God himself sent you to us. Can we go to her with you? It's true, we are interested in everything. But if you don't mind." "Yes, I don't mind. On the contrary, the support of young people is important to me. I really hope you won't laugh at me, that like this, an older woman believes in all this nonsense." "No, we won't laugh," the girl said and extended her hand in greeting. "My name is Helga. Can you tell me what problem you are coming to her with, if it's not a secret?" Barbara closed her eyes for a minute and wondered whether it was worth exposing her own grief and problems to people's rumors. But at that second it burst through her. What can I say? After all, each of us has had moments when we want to talk about everything to a stranger, to shift our problems at least for a minute. Yes, you understand, young people. Maybe I'm wrong myself. Maybe it just happened this way, but my husband and I haven't been able to have a child for a year now. They seem to be healthy, they underwent examinations, but nature does not give us a chance to become parents. Maybe the problem is me. After all, my husband has a child on his side. But that's what they say, and I'm barren. My mother-in-law treats me as if she were her own daughter, but not at all. I'm afraid that my husband will leave for someone else, and she will give birth to a child, and I will remain out of work. Yes, and I intuitively feel that he has a mistress. I don't know how serious it is." The company of young people listened and remained silent, because everyone understood her grief and sadness, and then Alex tried to somehow cheer everyone up. "And here you will check how much the old woman is a master of her craft. But by the way, our curator, historian Pablo, spoke about an old woman living in this village. Maybe this is her. This will be great. Sure, the topic of my fortune-telling." And he cheerfully raised his hand, and his idea was immediately picked up by the girl Helga. "Then the topic of ancient rituals for pregnancy is mine. This, by the way, is very interesting, and as far as I know, no one has written it yet. So my work will be unique and inimitable." "There is nothing unique. After all, this is all well-forgotten old stuff," said a guy with a thin beard that made him look like a deacon from the local parish from the top shelf. Barbara listened to them and smiled. After all, how good it was to travel in the company of such young people, ready to help and support in the most unusual decision. It was fun to ride. Evening imperceptibly turned to night, and the company, slowly settling into place, began to prepare for bed. The only one who could not sleep was Barbara, who was lying and looking at the shelf. I thought about the old woman, about her relationship with her husband, and about what would happen next. And Anthony at these moments was hugging the other one with all his might, giving her caresses and kisses. The woman carefully pulled her lover away from her and looked into his eyes. "Maybe we shouldn't rush and act like this thoughtlessly. Your parents are probably at home, and I'm not interested in tumbling on my marital bed. Jadwiga, but understand, my wife and I haven't slept together for a month. Yes, and I like you very much." He tried to kiss her, but she pulled away, and breaking away from his embrace, sat down at her desk. "I don't think this is a good idea." "Yes, and I need to work." "Work? How to bring you gifts? You always had time." The same skins for your new mink coat, ring and all. How now? I'm free, you need to work. Amazing. Jadwiga realized that she had gone a little too far, immediately jumped up and walked up to Anthony, gently hugging his waist. She kissed him lightly on the chin, but didn't get angry. You see, I need to think, get used to the idea that you and I will be doing this in the place where you slept with your wife. Just give me time. Okay, I'll go. I still need to eat and work. But tomorrow I think you and I will come to visit me. He winked at her and left the office, quietly closing the door. Anthony walked down the corridor and whistled a light melody, and Jadwiga put her head on her hands folded on the table and sobbed silently. But the truth is, how could she stoop to just running after a married man like that, being led by him? But in her youth she was the first beauty for whom the most enviable gentleman remained. Now what? There is simply no trace left of the past. How to be? Maybe we should just pack our things and move to another city and get a new job. Although on the other hand, what will change from this? Well, even if she finds a new job there, what will that do for her? Absolutely nothing. After all, Anthony's place will be taken by another, the same. She wiped away her tears and opened the window, taking a few deep breaths. We need to calm down, otherwise the director will come in and she'll be sitting there, crying and ugly. What will she say about her eyes then? As for Anthony, it's worth going to visit him and doing as her grandmother told her. Then you can think about the future. But Jadwiga did not even suspect that the fast train from the outback was taking Barbara to her own grandmother. Well, Barbara, our station Oleg said when all 5 of them went out onto the platform early in the morning, when the sun had not yet risen, and the early fog covered the grass with a shroud. Now let's get your suitcase and think about what we should do. Come on, Oleg, I'll carry him myself, he's light. By the way, look, there is a horse harnessed to a cart. Maybe they will give us a ride to the village. Indeed, nearby stood a horse harnessed to a cart, where a man of unknown age was dozing. He always came to the station with his mare, because he knew very well that only this train would make a stop near their village. And many of the sufferers are looking for their famous grandmother Elsa, as everyone called her. And at her age, she could still give odds to many young people. What kind of braid? As thick as your hand and up to your waist. One day he saw Elsa swimming late at night on their lake. Where even strong men don't go, they said that this lake has no bottom. Who wants to check whether this is true or not? And she splashed in the water, on which the shimmer of moonlight glittered. How can you not believe that she is a witch? Especially when this old woman comes out of the water, and her wet hair, like a veil down her back, drags along her waist. Bruno. He shook the reins, and his filly set off, heading as usual towards the people. Young good. By any chance did you come to visit our Elsa? Yes to her. And you probably wait for such petitioners and sufferers every time. No, my grandmother told me about you. And he burst into a very unpleasant laugh, which gave many goosebumps. But seriously, I'm here every morning, because they go to see our grandmother a lot, so that's how I earn extra money. Get into the cart, I'll take you in. If necessary, you can stay in my hut. I live alone, and the house is big. Thank you, Alex said and looked at his companions. You were sent to us by higher powers. But I don't know what higher powers are. But since we came, it was certainly out of great need. Come on, sit down. There's no need for you to be cold. We'll come to me, give you some tea, and then to our grandmother's. But she doesn't accept morning prayers before the end. And she lives in the village. And how far is it from you? Alex couldn't calm down and kept asking the man, and he answered very willingly. Well, how is it in the village? Rather, behind the village, go a couple of kilometers further inland to the forest lake. She lives on the edge of the forest and collects herbs there. Does she have any relatives? Barbara inserted her word, trying to keep up with the young people and not be branded a prude. Yes, I had a daughter, but she died of a cold. An only granddaughter, Jadwiga, remained, but she lives in the city and rarely visits her grandmother. The girl became arrogant that Elsa would give her her gift. But I think that's where it all ends. Jadwiga has no talent, or doesn't, or simply doesn't want to. And then let them decide among themselves. The places here were truly beautiful, such a nature untouched by man and technology. Apparently her mother-in-law was right. These are places of power, but soon they stopped in front of a fairly large house, where their driver directed his horse and jumped off the cart as usual. He extended his hand to Barbara and said, "Let me help you." "My name is Bruno. What about you?" The man's eyes were so blue that such a color simply does not exist in nature. "Barbara," the woman said, spellbound, and extended her hand. Bruno's palm turned out to be tender and strong at the same time, and with a slight movement the man helped her get off the cart, took her suitcase, and led her into his house. More precisely, it was not a simple village house, but a solid wood frame, which not everyone could afford. And as the woman noted, almost all the houses in the village were made of logs. Yes, we have a fairly prosperous village, and all thanks to Elsa. The man's words sounded like an answer to Barbara's silent question. It's because of her that a lot of people come to us, and where there is demand, there will always be supply. It's right. And the nature in your village is beautiful. Well, go into the house and serve tea, as promised. You can have tea, or something stronger. And if necessary, a bathhouse can be organized. The man said in a quiet voice, smiled slyly, and looked at the woman with bright blue eyes. This look, voice, and touch made Barbara feel either sweaty or cold. She had never experienced anything like this with Anthony, who was the only man in her life. Lord, how embarrassing, the woman thought. To come to such a wilderness for help in order to save the family, and look at yourself. Barbara, look. Oleg's voice distracted her from such thoughts, and she looked in the direction where the guy was pointing. The sun was rising over the horizon. Barbara was truly delighted with what she saw, because she had almost never seen a sunrise like this, and what she saw amazed her. Bruno, it's so beautiful here that you can't even imagine. Probably for me. A villager cannot understand all this beauty. But I ask you to come into the house. Barbara entered the house and looked around. Is this really how people live in villages? Everything in the house was done with taste and skill. TV and refrigerator, microwave, massive table, and beautiful carved chairs. In general, this could be called a merchant's house, but not a cab driver's house. Yes, she should live here. Apparently, Bruno saw it all on her face and said directly, "If you want, you can stay here as long as you want." Bruno, thank you, of course, but you practically don't know me, and you never know what trouble I came here with. Yes, what a disaster. The man has your woman, but you cannot conceive a child. Do not argue. I see a lot too. But you, Barbara, decide your fate. The man shook his curly head and did not continue what he wanted to say. Bruno understood that silence is often golden. And Barbara smiled and thought for a minute maybe she really should leave her Anthony and start living here with this local handsome guy in this distant village and give birth to a bunch of little kids. God, how she wanted this to simply forget her past and come here. Bruno, thank you, but their conversation was interrupted by young people who had just managed to put things in the rooms allocated to them and went out into the hall. Alex looked carefully at Bruno and Barbara and immediately understood everything, but did not show it. Bruno, what about your famous tea? They say that you brew it with special herbs. This is what it is. But sit down. I'll put on the kettle and treat you to more honey than you've ever tasted in your life. When will it be possible to see Grandma? Don't worry, we won't miss it. In our village there is a small church, and then the church bell rang, which means the service is over. Then we can get ready. The woman nodded her head and sat down on a bench that stood under the icons, while Bruno and the young people set the table. After half an hour, such an aroma wafted through the room that you could lose your head from this sweet variety, and the smell of pies and honey made your stomach growl. Wow, what smells! What a treat for the eyes and belly, Helga said and reached for the pie. I'm so hungry that I'm ready to eat everything. Eat up, girl. You, as a future mother, will still need strength, Bruno said and looked at her carefully. Helga almost choked from these words, but casting a sideways glance at Bruno, did not say anything to him. Maybe this Bruno really knows that he won't even have to go to his grandmother. Barbara thought mentally. Good afternoon. Barbara crossed the threshold of a small house standing on the edge of the forest. Come on in. Don't stand in the doorway of my house. I'm glad to have guests. A stately and beautiful older woman, with a long braid, she looks like the heroine of old paintings, but certainly not like an old woman who brews another batch of potion and dries bats. As I understand it, you are coming to me about your husband. Yes, my name is Barbara, and my husband is Anthony. And I also came about the children. There is no way we can give birth to them. Yes, and you will not give birth to them from your own. He walks, and as long as she keeps him under her thumb, you will not live. Yes, and without her you would have separated. It's just a matter of time. Barbara was simply stunned by what she heard and almost fainted, leaning on the door frame. To avoid falling, she grabbed the door handle and closed her eyes for a second. Yes, I see that you didn't know about it, although you internally suspected it. So quickly sit down at the table. Here, have a drink. Barbara sat down on a bench and took a wooden mug with a drink from the witch's hands, drank it in one gulp, and, looking at it, said quietly, "What am I supposed to do? What should I do? Waiting for a new husband? Although no, your destiny has already found you. Just wait a little and everything will be fine for you. And your own home, and children, and a good husband. Are you sure about that?" Barbara still hoped that this was some kind of prank, and she would now get up, go home, and everything would be fine with them. Wait, and your destiny will come. I wonder who is my betrothed. Barbara looked at the woman ironically, not knowing how to react to the words, believe them or take them as a joke. You don't believe me, but I'll tell you one thing: he will have blue eyes. Dark-haired. Yes, you yourself will recognize him among many. Such a prince on a white horse. And Elsa burst into cheerful laughter. Then she sat down next to Barbara and looked carefully into her eyes. Taking her hand in hers, the healer began to stroke it and whisper something in an incomprehensible language. The woman sat spellbound and looked at her carefully, not knowing how to react, and then she simply began to feel inclined to sleep. And my head involuntarily dropped into my hands. Sleep, my girl, sleep. You didn't come here from a good life, from your orphanhood. But I will take away all your troubles, and may you dream about your real destiny. And Elsa carefully laid her down on the bench, put a pillow under her head, and went out into the yard where a group of young people were sitting. She glanced at the eldest among them and waved her hand, beckoning him to her. I see you are the eldest here. So listen, Barbara is sleeping now. Don't worry, everything will be fine with her. What do you understand, students? Yes, we have folklore expeditions, and if possible, then maybe you can tell us local legends, songs, or signs. Yes, young people these days are not too interested in magic, and even my granddaughter over there refused the gift, and I was so hoping to pass on my knowledge to her. And what will happen to your gift now? Helga looked carefully at this still strong woman and bit her lip, afraid to ask too much. What will happen, my dear? And she looked at another as her successor. Is that allowed? I take it this is a man? You understand everything correctly, man. And although in our family it is customary to pass the gift from grandmother to granddaughter, but if God is not worthy of a girl or something else, the gift should be passed on to a man. Interesting. What if he had no talent for your knowledge? My dear guests, understand that each of us has magic, and sometimes it hides so deeply that it is simply difficult to awaken it. But it exists, believe me, believe me. They sat and talked about everything and nothing, and Barbara was sleeping, and most surprisingly, she dreamed of the same Bruno who brought them from the station. But in this dream, it was no longer a simple man in old jacket and sneakers, but a handsome middle-aged man looking at her intently. And next to him stood two beautiful blue-eyed children. Barbara shouted his name so loudly that everyone on the street heard her voice and jumped out and quickly rushed into the house. Barbara, are you okay? Helga was the first to run up to her and took her hand. Yes, it was probably a dream. And there was Bruno who brought us here, two children. He took them into the house. Our house. So I saw my betrothed, thought Elsa. Barbara herself did not understand why she was so angry at the words of this woman that her future husband would come to her in a dream. But she jumped up from the bench and quickly ran out into the street. The woman, not understanding what she was doing, quickly headed away from the Elsa house towards the village with the only desire to pick up her things and leave here for her usual little world. Barbara, wait, where are you going? Bruno's voice sounded so unexpectedly that the woman tripped out of the blue and fell to her knees with all her might, painfully breaking her knee. Bruno, who asked you to scare you like that? Now my knees are broken. Forgive me, for God's sake, let's go, I'll treat your wounds. I have a first aid kit at home. It's not far from here, a few houses away. Already at home, Bruno himself treated her wounds and carefully looked at her face. What did our seer tell you? Judging by the expression on your face, you didn't like it at all. Imagine I didn't like it. I went for advice, but the outcome was completely different. Well, this happens in our world. Elsa said that there would be another, and this one was different. You, Bruno, came to me in a dream with 2 small children. Now Bruno himself was taken aback by what he heard and almost dropped from his hands the can of milk that he had brought from his neighbor. Is this really her, his destiny, which he has been waiting for so long, and which Elsa herself spoke about? This is the turn of events. He put the jar on the table, took out a cup and poured milk into it. He handed it to the woman. Drink this milk. Don't want. They've already given me something to drink in the morning. And after that it turned out that you are my destiny. What will happen after this milk? And she nodded towards the table with her head. Nothing will happen, because the milk is fresh. But whatever you want, I'll drink. Having poured himself some milk, Bruno drank the cup in one gulp and, putting it on the table, sat down on the bench. It turned out strange. But if this is true, then this woman is his future wife, and he will have the children he so wanted. Barbara, what if you really are my destiny? And in your dream, did you really see our children? Bruno, do you understand how unrealistic and stupid this all is? We have only known each other for a couple of hours. We are seeing each other, one might say, for the first time. And you are talking about a family that may not exist. After all, I am married and I have a husband. Barbara, I'm sorry if I allowed myself more than I should, but I believe and I really, really want to have a family, children. And you are such a beautiful woman, I don't dare detain you any longer. At least you can always count on my hospitality. Thank you, Bruno, I understand you, but it all seems so unreal and mystical to me. How? It's like a fairy tale. Bruno looked at the woman with a smile and noted that she smiled back at him. And thank you for your hospitality. If you accept, I will come to visit you again. Clean, so relax. Come. I will always be glad to see you. That's what they decided on. And in the evening, Bruno was taking the whole company back to the station, where the fast train heading to the capital was supposed to stop for. 3 minutes. Bruno helped load things into Barbara's carriage and, looking at her, said quietly, "If you need my help, come. I will not betray you, and I have enough money I can provide for you." Bruno, thank you. I'll think about your proposal and, if necessary, I'll come. She stood at the window and waved her hand to him, and Bruno stood on the platform, and his heart sank with melancholy and sadness. That's how his love left, and he couldn't do anything. All we could do was wait and hope that the witch was right and Barbara would return. Barbara drove home, thinking about what the local healer told her. Barbara, did you get answers to your questions? Alex looked at the woman carefully. Don't even know. I had more questions than answers. What should we do with them? She shrugged and turned out the window. I began to look at the trees, stations, and houses flying past without finding an answer. Barbara thought and thought and thought and thought, and time passed inexorably, giving no hope for a better outcome. Anthony, hello. Here I am. Barbara tried to put a smile on her face, because according to legend, she returned from vacation and should have been fresh and rested. But the answer was silence in the apartment. Strange. At the station, she called Anthony and said she was on her way. To which the husband snapped, "Come, I'm home." Yes, Anthony was at home, but not alone, but with Jadwiga. The woman finally came to his home and spent the night on her lover's marital bed. Tea. Now, Anthony, I'll probably go. Now your wife will arrive. I don't want her to see me. Now I will decide in this house. I'm tired of you and I constantly hiding, and I think we should talk frankly with my wife and amicably decide what and how. Are you sure? The mistress looked at him carefully and stroked his hair. Yes, I am sure. In the meantime, my wife is traveling. The couple was so carried away by each other that they simply did not hear the door open and Barbara enter the apartment. She called her husband, and without receiving an answer, followed the noise into her own bedroom. What opened before her eyes instantly threw the woman into shock, and she simply did not know what to say, what to do. Barbara stood and looked at all this obscenity and simply remained silent. But Jadwiga noticed her first and screamed. the woman pulled the blanket over herself, covering her naked body. "Anthony, stop." She pushed him and pointed at the doorway with her eyes. "Barbara, weren't you taught to knock?" There was anger and indignation in his voice. After all, his own wife dared to stop him at a very interesting place to knock. "Anthony, are you serious? You brought your mistress into our bedroom, and I have to knock on the door of my own apartment." "Yes. In the meantime, please, my dear wife, prepare some food for us while we rest." From such words, Barbara was not only speechless, she fell into a kind of stupor. Stupor shackled her thoughts and will, and leaving her suitcase in the corridor, she obediently went to the kitchen. A mountain of unwashed dishes, leftover potatoes on the stove, dried soup, all this was waiting for her there. Anthony's voice sounded impudent, arrogant, and mocking. "Imagine, my dear husband, I cooked soup." And she threw a pan of boiling water onto the bed, almost hitting Anthony and his mistress. "What is your crazy wife doing?" Jadwiga screamed and jumped out of bed naked, grabbed her clothes and began to dress feverishly. She should be sued. Look, I have a burn on my legs. Better yet, take her to a mental institution." Madhouse? Barbara could not believe her ears and the fact that her husband did not react in any way to his mistress's words. "I'll call the police now and they'll take you away from here." "Barbara, calm down and don't shout. We need to talk about how adults can decide, so to speak, everything amicably." "Amicably, my dear husband. They decide to dress and not jump out of bed. You don't have to worry. I don't need your excuses, explanations, and everything else." She threw the empty pan on the bed and went to her room. She began to collect things in her bag, throwing them away without folding them. Barbara grabbed documents, money, and the few jewelry that her husband had given her from the table, and throwing everything into a small backpack, ran out of the room. Barbara quickly headed towards the exit, but her path was blocked by Anthony, who had managed to put on trousers for decency. "Barbara, where are you going? What are you doing? Don't you see?" Jadwiga said with a malicious smile. "She simply leaves you, and you should just file for divorce." "Jadwiga, I didn't give you my word here. Let him clean for you, cook, iron your shirts, get along with your mother and father. Or have you forgotten what your parents told you when you married me?" Anthony would never forget these words. When they first submitted an application to the registry office, the father threatened, "This is your first and last marriage. Take care of your family. If you get divorced, all your property will be transferred to your daughter-in-law. And it doesn't matter for what reason they would divorce, there will be no children, or the wife won't please. My mother and I will always be on my daughter-in-law's side. Moreover, Barbara Sirota, and to offend such people is a sin. It's a sin, Father, to live with someone you don't love. But I won't leave Barbara." But now he remembered that conversation, and he had no choice but to bite his lips and think about what to do. Jadwiga jumped out of bed at such words and, like a fish, gasped for air. She simply did not expect such a turn of events. It was not easy for her to accept the fact that her legal wife so easily accepted the very fact of betrayal, but also that this person has every chance of ending up on the street, and in the status of a beggar and homeless man. And who needs it? Anthony tried with all his might to restrain his anger and not raise his hand against his wife, so as not to kill her. "Do you understand that it was a moment of weakness?"
So minute that you had enough time to get from work and here. Anthony, don't try to tell me stories now. You have been with this woman for quite a long time, and thank God that everything turned out this way.
"It happened. How is that?"
Jadwiga could not forgive anyone for disgracing her like that, and not even allowing her to get a word in.
"Jadwiga, you are a grown woman. You were simply used. You satisfied your own ego, and that's all. Or did you think that he would give up his wealth for you? Never. Has he ever given you a valuable gift?" "No, I didn't give it. Only a bouquet of lilies of the valley, and even then from our city flower bed." Jadwiga, of course, blatantly lied about everything, trying to downplay the importance of Anthony in her life, as well as the volume of financial investments in her. "You see, did you want to cheat him out of money?" Barbara stopped for a minute and mentally wondered if she had taken everything, if she had taken all the most valuable things. Barbara came out of the entrance and looked carefully. "Yeah, there's Anthony's car. The neighbors on the bench have been gossiping since the very morning the kids have been scurrying around in the sandbox. The woman put her backpack on the bench and thought for a minute. Where should she go? No, as a last resort, you can, of course, call your mother-in-law and ask to stay with her for the first time. Barbara didn't even know how and what to do next, because Anthony knows where she lives, or rather, she lived before, and where she works. For the sake of money, he will pester her with his visits, ask for forgiveness, and try to return her. But no, I won't let you interfere in my life. What if you return to the village, to that same Bruno, to his log house, and stay there forever? Barbara thought to herself and sat down on the bench for a minute. But then the front door slammed and Anthony ran out into the street, all disheveled and angry. Apparently the showdown with Jadwiga was serious. Look, her husband's face is so red. The anger makes my eyes flash like lightning. He looked for Barbara, and when he noticed her on the bench, he exhaled with relief and approached, trying to speak as calmly as possible. Barbara, I ask you, let's talk quietly and calmly. Let's talk like adults and reasonable people. How's that? Do reasonable people really just drag all sorts of indecent things onto the marital bed? Well, you see, she tempted me. But I love you. Don't drive me away. It seems to me that you are more worried about your parental capital than about me, or where I was on how to resolve the issue with children. What would you do if she got pregnant? Would you live with 2 families? But this is a utopia. Your parents would not accept this state of affairs. And where would you do something? Oh, Anthony, tell me, please. Don't know. Anthony really didn't know what he would do next. After all, he never planned his life so far ahead. And now I will still stay with you. No, Anthony, I just don't need you. Sorry, but I'm leaving you.
Okay, now I have a question. And where do you intend to go?
He stood and looked at her with an angry, twisted face, cherishing the last hope that his wife would ask to go home. Believe me, my dear hubby, this question should not worry you in any way. Yeah, that means you have someone to go to. And you will tell me that I am cheating on you. Were you really planning on leaving for someone else? I don't have any lover, and you shouldn't attribute your own sins to me, and I can go, for example, live with your mother for a while, and then think about who I should be with. She turned around and, picking up her bag, walked towards the roadway, where on the side of the road she simply raised her hand and began to catch the car. But the woman did not want to upset Mary, and she will tell her all her adventures later. Now it's time to think and think about everything calmly. And where are we going, dear girl? The driver winked at her cheerfully and turned the ignition key in his old, but still working car with checkers on the door. Come on, she waved, so to speak, without looking at the train station. The driver nodded his head in understanding and rushed off, trying to drive carefully and avoid getting into holes and potholes so that the passenger with sad eyes, God forbid, would not get seasick. They drove for quite a long time, about 15 minutes, or even 20. Although, needless to say, it was the peak of the lunch break, and it was also Friday. Many residents of the metropolis tried at these moments to leave the stuffy city, but she wanted to see Bruno again. Sorry, did you say something? The driver looked carefully at this strange passenger, who was muttering something absurd under her breath. Did you tell me something? Oh no, sorry, I didn't say anything. Probably from an old habit. The taxi driver nodded understandingly and continued on his way. And Barbara continued to look out the window at the city landscapes flying by, and with every second her confidence grew more and more. Confidence that she should go to Bruno and come what may. And let me be considered a walker, but at least this is honest. And then I'll go to court. The taxi driver looked in the mirror at his passenger and did not say a word. You never know what kind of clients you come across. The main thing is that they get paid. And then it's no longer his business. Barbara paid the driver and, taking her bag, entered the old station building. She looked at the display of departing and arriving trains. Yeah, here's the direction she needs. Girl, give me a ticket for the evening train number 157. Yes, full. When the ticket was in her pocket, Barbara realized how hungry she was. Yeah, from one train to another. And I didn't even have time to change clothes, eat, or take a normal shower. That's why she wildly wanted to throw off her dusty clothes, stand under the stream of hot water and wash away all her sorrows. But in the evening, Barbara sat comfortably in her compartment and, taking out a mirror, carefully looked at her reflection. It's good that I at least washed my face in the toilet, otherwise I would have walked around looking tired and exhausted. It's such a pity that she didn't take Bruno's phone. After all, even if he doesn't want to accept her, he'll simply send her home. So what should she do then? Yes, do nothing. I'll just go back to my room and continue working. Although why on earth would she return to her little room? She legally has the right to part of the apartment, which his parents gave her and Anthony for their wedding. Therefore, to hell with dogs. Out of principle, I won't let you live comfortably with your mistress. And it's true. And this Jadwiga wanted not only to grab her husband with a hook, but also her property. What if she can get pregnant? Barbara tossed and turned in bed all night with such thoughts, but could not sleep a wink. Just before dawn, she went out into the vestibule and began to look out the window. Forest, fields, power lines, all this flashed before her eyes, like her own life, gray and joyless. And I really wanted normal human relationships, warmth and comfort. Girl, your station is next. The conductor handed her a ticket and smiled sweetly. So all my life on wheels. The carriage is her home, Barbara thought. But apparently everyone chooses their own destiny. It's nothing you can do. After 20 minutes, she was already standing on an empty platform far from her house and turning her head just like the first time. Everything around was shrouded in fog. It was so quiet that you could hear the dew dripping from the grass. Yes, neither Bruno nor his cart and mare were visible. Was she really so mistaken, and he simply didn't come? But he said that he's here every day. But as it turned out, he lied. Barbara stood and almost cried. But then in the distance she heard first quiet, and then more and more distinct clattering of hooves. And now the cart appeared. Has he really arrived? Didn't you lie? Barbara. Bruno immediately recognized her figure from afar and thought to himself with surprise that he had made a mistake. But no. What are you doing here? You just left. Bruno, is your proposal that you can stay in the village relevant? Barbara tried to squeeze out a smile, but it came out somehow crooked and askew. Yes, sure. I see you are alone here. There is no one else. Then get on the cart, and let's go. The man helped her sit more comfortably on the cart and lightly spurred his mare. Now they were driving in silence, not saying a word. And what could we talk about? Bruno understood that Barbara had not come here again out of a good life and asked to stay with him. And the woman felt uncomfortable explaining something along the way. Barbara, can I ask a question? Why did I come here? You know, your healer was right. And my husband is not just walking around, but he also managed to bring his mistress into our house, put her on the bed, and asked me to make them some soup.
Yeah, thought Bruno, this woman has nothing good. Apparently, she really didn't come here out of good happiness, but that means Elsa was really right. This woman is his destiny. That's exactly what she said in the evening, when Barbara had already left. And he drank quietly alone in his own kitchen.
You're still standing there drunk, Bruno. Elsa's voice sounded right next to his ear, causing the man to tremble so much that he almost spilled the glass of tincture. Ugh, Elsa. You walk like a cat. At least cough at the threshold for decency. What if I'm with a woman? Yes, with what woman? Except with this little white one. And the healer nodded at the bottle of cloudy tincture that stood in the very center of the table. You shouldn't get drunk. Look, you'll still sleep through tomorrow morning. Well, tomorrow will be a normal morning, that's all. That's not all, said the old woman. I had a vision that Barbara would arrive tomorrow. So you should be at the station as usual. Understood me? I understand. I haven't drunk my brains out yet. But why would Barbara come back? She didn't believe a single word you said. Well, whether you believed it or not, it's none of your business. But she will most likely believe her own eyes when she comes home and sees her husband in bed with his mistress. Are you sure about this? And if she doesn't see it, then what? She didn't even look in my direction. And you say that she will come to me? Let's argue. If he comes, you will take me as godmother to your child. Yes, deal. If so, then I will carry you in my arms for this. He hugged the old woman, and she patted him on the back and spoke quietly. Better stop drinking and go to bed. Tomorrow will be a new day and a new life. True, from the very morning Bruno kept doubting whether he should go to the station or not. After all, the witch did not receive on Mondays and the people knew it. But now maybe it's not worth going. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, the man ran his hand over his stubble. No, I'll probably go. Now I'll go and shave and go now. All this flashed through his head in a matter of seconds. And Bruno, quietly nodding at the mare, glanced sideways at Barbara. She too was silent, mentally recalling how she found her husband in bed and that his mistress turned out to be a Polish woman. Bruno, do you believe Eliza? Do you believe what she says? Why not believe? Just recently I couldn't even imagine that you would come, but now you're here. He wanted to say that she herself asked to stay with him, but he bit his tongue just in time. And I myself asked to live with you. Is that what you wanted to say, Bruno? If you don't want me to live with you, then stop your horse. I'll go back. No, Barbara, you definitely won't leave here now. And if you are embarrassed by the fact that you will live with me as a guest, then I can tell you right away, marry me, and you will be a full-fledged mistress in my house. The woman looked sideways at Bruno and was just about to say something when her mobile phone rang. Looking at the screen, Barbara picked up the phone. Yes, Mary. Harry, Barbara, where are you? Bruno has been calling me since the morning. He says you're missing. No, you are neither at work nor in your room, in the dorm. And now I'm going for the second round to the village where the healer Elsa lives. For the second round. How can we understand what is actually happening? Were you there or not? Was. But I didn't really like what you told me the first time. Oh, how can I tell you, Mary Pavlovna, your son definitely has a mistress, and I want to divorce him. But where are you now? I'm going to the village, and I'm thinking of staying here for a while. Are you sure about this? My mother-in-law understood that nothing could be solved by shouting and swearing, so she tried to speak calmly. Yes, just don't get me wrong. It's hard for me to forgive betrayal. I need to think and make a decision with a calm mind. That's right, Barbara, but please call me. Do not get lost. Of course, I understand that my son is not perfect, but I would not want to lose a daughter-in-law like you. I heard you, and thank you for everything that you have done and are doing for me. Barbara hung up the phone and looked into the distance. The first rays of the morning sun illuminated the wheat field, and a light breeze made the ears look like a gentle sea. This is the truth, how fate can put everything in its place. The mother-in-law turned out to be closer to her husband and mother, and the stranger simply took him in and sheltered him in his house. Did she, mother-in-law, call?
Bruno looked at the woman carefully, trying not to show his excitement.
Yes, she said that Anthony was looking for me. She probably asked you to come back? Oddly enough, but no. After all, he understands I don't have the character to forgive betrayal like that. But you, Bruno, are still ready to host a married lady. Ready. But may I ask, how long will this sweet lady remain married? Not for long. Just believe me, we need to think about the situation a little now. And in a few days I'll just file for divorce. That's all. Bruno wanted to ask what about us, but he bit his tongue and turned his horse towards his house. He opened the gate and led the horse into the yard. Then he helped Barbara bring things into the house and, pointing to a cozy back room, said, "This is my daughter's room. You can stay here as long as you want." "Do you have a daughter?" Barbara looked at the man in surprise. "Yes, I had a woman when I was young, but it probably didn't work out. But I don't abandon my daughter, I help her. And if you want, I can introduce her." Bruno's words startled her. But the woman just smiled and answered, "Yes, we should probably get to know each other, but a little later. And to be honest, Bruno, I don't even know how to react to your proposal." "Which one exactly?" "To meet my daughter, or remain a full-fledged mistress in your house." He will only be glad of this. Elsa's words behind them made both of them flinch. "You are back after all, Barbara. So I was right. Yes, and you were right. I wanted to come to you later, but I got ahead of you." "Nothing. I always say what I see, and it always comes true. Anyway, on the occasion of your arrival, I brought you a cake. I baked it myself. Knew you'd be back, Barbara." Barbara looked carefully at a real masterpiece of culinary skill with pigtails, curls with 2 doves on top. Wow, just wedding. But we are not husband and wife yet. But you are a couple that fate brought together. And you shouldn't deny this. Bruno will make you feel good. But if in doubt, don't rush into a decision. Just wait and see, and your Anthony will show his true colors. and then you will finally make the right decision." Elsa turned around and went to the gate, and the man and woman stood at the porch of the house and, dumbfounded, looked after her. "Yes, Barbara, and if you want, then come to my place for tea tonight with Bruno." Barbara nodded her head silently and turned her gaze to Bruno, who also looked at her incomprehensibly. Anyway, which have not be avoided. By evening, Barbara had gotten a little comfortable in the house, laid out her simple belongings, and having prepared dinner, sat down on the veranda. "How do you like it, Barbara? In my house, if you need something, you always say, 'We won't buy it in our store.' This way you can go to the city. I have a car in my garage." "Do you have a car? What about the horse and cart? Why don't you drive a car? You see, this is a kind of production, an entourage or something, but nothing more. Believe me, Barbara, this is all the man gestured around the house and the farmstead with her predictions and help. You can be sure of this." "Yes, I'll try. But Bruno, tell me, what did Elsa mean when she said that my husband would show his face?"
But you can ask her this. It's time for us to get ready for a visit.
Here is the familiar little hut again. Grass is on the walls, sedge on the floor. Everything here breathed with a certain mystery, about which epics and fairy tales are written. It's so fairy tale-like here. Perhaps the only thing missing is a black cat.
But why is it not enough? I have one like this in my house. Apparently he just decided to go for a walk. Or, as always, he went out hunting for mice.
Wow. Elsa, can I ask a question? What did you mean when you said that my Anthony would show his true colors? But really, should I be afraid of physical harm from him? Or will Anthony, as always, limit himself to a verbal skirmish? Yes, you see, Barbara, your Anthony is not as simple as it might seem. But I won't tell you anything yet. You must see everything for yourself with your own eyes. But I hope he won't harm me. She really was scared. After all, you never know what you can expect from an angry husband. Don't worry, he won't cause any physical harm to you or anyone else. But you will see everything for yourself later. Barbara nodded her head, but the anxiety did not go away. The unknown scared her. But the woman's anxiety was also noticed by Bruno, who simply took her hand and, leaning towards her face, spoke quietly. Don't worry, Barbara. I'm also difficult and will always protect you. Do you understand me? His voice sounded different, not the same as always, but confident and tough. There was a sense of animal strength in him. This sent goosebumps down Barbara's arms, and looking at them, the woman noticed how the hairs stood on end. She simply nodded her head, mentally agreeing. But why lie to yourself? It was so nice when a man solves all your problems, when he takes responsibility for his own woman, home, and in general. But apparently Bruno's intonation somewhat frightened Barbara. And noticing the expression on her face, the man immediately spoke, quickly softening his intonation. Barbara, I'm sorry if I scared you, but I'm really not a mama's boy or some guy from the village. I have a higher education, 3 diplomas, and work in a hospital. As fate would have it, he even became a novice in a monastery. But now I live here. Wow. Wow. You, Bruno, have a biography. But Barbara still wanted to say something when at that moment she received a call. Yes, someone knows how to interrupt a conversation, the woman thought. But looking at the mobile screen, she sighed heavily. Well, yes, who else could call her? Faithful hubby Anthony, who apparently cooled down after a fit of rage and decided to dial it. Barbara, where are you? The once beloved husband asked without words of greeting. Anthony, why do you need this? Well, you have your polished girlfriend, so live with her. I will file for divorce myself. You don't have to worry. Yeah, there's really nothing to worry about. And will you also leave me the apartment, which, by the way, my parents bought? I'll leave it if the court agrees to give me a divorce. A minute of silence on the phone spoke eloquently. Anthony was calculating all the pros and cons, feverishly wondering what the catch was. Barbara, tell me the whole truth. What's the catch? You are giving me the apartment just like that, without trying to defend it for yourself. I'm not as mercantile as you. Come on, how pious you are. The woman heard her husband's heavy, angry breathing on the phone, and could not understand how until now she had not noticed all this, all his anger and greed and lust. God, how blind she was. And why are you silent? Or do you have nothing to say? Just imagine, there is something. Why do you think we haven't had children until now? I wonder why. You shouldn't answer though. My dear husband, it's all my fault. That's what you always said. No, all this time I gave you one special herbal decoction, and thanks to it you could not get pregnant. And why? I didn't need a wife like you. You were picked up on the street like a puppy, warmed up and given a successful marriage. But why do I need a wife without family and tribe? A beggar who could not give anything to me and my children. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Said Barbara, surprised that she had not yet fainted from what she heard. Yes, Anthony shouted into the phone. Barbara simply pressed the end button, not wanting to continue this conversation any further. She leaned her head against the warm wood of the house and closed her eyes. Lord, what an idiot and a brute she lived with all these years. And she firmly believed that he loved her, that everything would be fine with them. Did your husband call? Bruno looked at her carefully and nervously fingered a black rosary with a cross hanging on it in his hand. Yes, he threatened. And you are right, and Elsa. He gave me a very, very unpleasant surprise. So to speak, he opened his eyes and showed his own black insides. Elsa smiled and, raising an eyebrow, looked at the woman, as if asking, and what did he tell you there? Barbara sat with her eyes closed and didn't know whether to tell them or not everything that Anthony had told her. But all this put such pressure on her from within that she simply did not have the strength to remain silent. Elsa, you can't imagine how hard my soul is right now. I just don't know how to live with this anymore. Tell me, maybe I can help you with advice. And I, if necessary, with my fists and a gun. Bruno sat closer to Barbara and took her hand in his. But the woman didn't even notice it. You see, all this time while my husband and I lived, he slipped some herbs into my food or drink. I don't know where, and I couldn't get pregnant. And all this time, my husband bullied me and reproached me for being infertile, for not being able to consider myself a full-fledged woman and mother. A tear quietly rolled down her cheek, but only Elsa noticed her, who sat down next to her and quietly stroked her hand. Nothing, Barbara, believe me, every poison has its own antidote. Me and Bruno will help you feel good again. Do you think I can have children? What are you saying? And you don't need to understand me. With these words I conjure fear and sadness. But Bruno will bring water from my stream and we will drink tea. And then everything will be fine with you. By the way, let's go to the forest today. Can you help me find a fern flower? Today is the night when your deepest desires can come true. An hour later, the company went to the local lake, where almost the entire village had actually gathered. Wow, Barbara thought, looking around. There were tents with benches and tables around the lake. A variety of foods were cooked over an open fire, and there were trays and refrigerators with drinks and sweets. There was no crowd of young people. Don't be surprised. We have ethno-tourism at the highest level. And my experience and knowledge help the villagers get on their feet, earn an honest living, and show guests a different side of village life, and ancient wisdom. Honestly, I couldn't even think. Barbara, we also have swings installed on the field. Let's go for a ride. Swing? Doom. The woman's surprise knew no bounds. Yes, these type of boats on high poles. Believe me, it's very exciting. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the field, where indeed a high swing had already been installed and people were crowding around it to take a ride with the breeze. Barbara and Bruno rode on boats, laughed like children, enjoying the wind in their hair, the night sky, and the fact that they could surrender to the holiday like this and not think about anything. And Barbara rejoiced like a child, not at all reproaching herself for being able to rejoice and enjoy freedom. I feel as good today as I have never felt in my life. And I'm not even the least bit ashamed of my actions. Because I left my husband, I'm not even angry at him for his words, but for what he did. Because why? Bruno looked at her carefully and gently pulled her towards him, putting his arm around her shoulders. Because I'm finally free. Bruno leaned over and gently kissed her mulled wine-sweet lips, lightly and unobtrusively, trying not to frighten off such a moment of trust. The man was afraid that Barbara would push him away. But either nature or herbs or wine made her more pliable to her desires, which she always suppressed in herself, forcing her to respond to his kiss with a passionate and demanding kiss. Barbara, of course, I'm glad that you allowed me to kiss you. But let's not rush. And this is what a man tells me. It's strange, usually it's the partner who has to say it. But no, don't think anything like that. You are a beautiful woman. I like you very much. But I don't want you to regret your momentary weakness later. Barbara pulled away from Bruno but did not let go of his hand, but turned around and pulled him towards the lake. Then maybe we can go make wreaths and float them on the water. Let's go. They wove wreaths, threw them into the water, picked flowers and rejoiced at the night, like children lying on the grass and counting the stars in the sky. Good morning, Barbara. Bruno lay leaning on his hand and looked at her with a smile. Bruno, I hope you and I didn't sleep yesterday. I wanted to ask Barbara, but I didn't dare ask such a frank question. Weren't we asleep? No. You don't have to worry about this. We were by the river, weaving wreaths, counting the stars in the sky. You leaned on my shoulder and just fell asleep. Why didn't I bring you home? Well, because you asked me to take you here. Here is the answer to your question. How did we end up here? Yeah, I don't know, Bruno, what came over me yesterday. Probably your tea or local mulled wine. But I admit, it was the best day of my life. But Bruno, there is no need to spoil such a wonderful morning. Let's put this aside for a while. Then come on, get up. I'll prepare you a real rural breakfast at home. Oh, that already sounds great. Bruno helped his unexpected night companion get up and led her home again. They walked along a field path, smoothly turning into a rural road, and chatted about nothing. And Barbara more and more often caught herself thinking that she felt wildly, to the point of pain in her heart. She always wanted to walk like this, talk, and not think about anything. Barbara, what are you thinking about now? Bruno looked carefully into her face, hidden under the flowers of yesterday's flower. Yes, you just shine from the inside. Is it true? Yes, you know, Bruno, I want to tremble in my knees and just walk like that and not think about anything. Then I propose to meet the dawn in the field every morning. How do you like this idea? Unless, of course, you sleep until noon. No, and I don't sleep until noon. That's why I like the idea itself. And it's true. What can I say? Fate itself brought these two together. It was brought together in the most mysterious way when, a month after they met, Barbara and Bruno soon got married, and the local priest married them in an ancient wooden church, where many people from the village and surrounding towns came. This was the first wedding in this temple. And the clergyman himself said then, by combining this couple in a legal marriage, we launch into our hearts not only love, but also the piety of our Lord, love each other, be fruitful, and live happily ever after. Oddly enough, Barbara's ex-mother-in-law came to their wedding and was sincerely happy for her former daughter-in-law. She even asked Barbara for forgiveness when she was leaving and asked to come visit them. Things didn't work out for her son with Jadwiga. Anthony then took her to the station for the last time and asked, "Did you even love me?" Well, how can I tell you? Anthony probably loved her in her own way. But you yourself understand that you have nothing, because your parents gave all their property to Barbara. Why do I need this? If we had children, where would we live? In my apartment? Sorry, Anthony, but you can't build a family on such conditions. So the girl cheerfully kissed him goodbye on the cheek and jumped into her carriage, waving to him from the steps. Yeah, what a fool you were, Anthony. You lost everything you had, your wife who loved you, the opportunity to have children and a home, and his parents abandoned him. They simply stopped communicating and answering phone calls. But one fine evening this happened. Anthony, hi, this is Barbara. If you still remember. Anthony made me sweat and get goosebumps all over my body. Of course he remembered her and could not forget her. No matter how hard I tried, I immersed myself in my work. Drinking and partying, nothing helped. Hello, Barbara. Of course I remember hearing from my mother that you got married. Well, your free life didn't last long? Yes, not for long. That's not why I'm calling. Barbara thought for a minute whether she should have said this or not, but she still said, I want to thank you so much for bringing Jadwiga to our house, and I witnessed it. Otherwise, I would not have returned to this village, would not have decided to have a relationship with Bruno, and would not have gotten pregnant. Yes, Anthony, I am carrying twins under my heart, so thank you very much. From what he heard, Anthony's cheekbones twisted. They played with anger, but the man could not say anything in response. All this could have been his, but it never happened, and all due to my own stupidity. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Yes. Although no, I signed over the apartment that your parents registered in my name. So you can live in peace and build new relationships and tell her thank you very much. You can gloat. Jadwiga left me after a few days. Now I'm free like a bird. But when I meet her, I will definitely say your regards. Thank you, Anthony, and all the best to you. Barbara hung up, and Anthony just held the phone in his hand for a few more minutes and listened to the short beeps, not knowing how to react. No way. Barbara is happy. She has a new husband and 2 children, and he was left without a home and family. Even his relatives abandoned him. And he himself is to blame for this, because there is no one else to blame. But Bruno himself had a different opinion. Barbara, maybe you shouldn't have called him and told him all this. He gently hugged her shoulders, approaching her from behind. Bruno, you know, I've wanted to say this to his face for so long that I probably wouldn't be able to restrain myself. And as Elsa says, it's better to regret what you did than what you didn't do. As if your ex-hubby wouldn't do any harm. But you are with me. Barbara looked at her husband in bewilderment. With you. But Barbara, just understand, you can't always cause harm just by deeds. You can use an unkind word or a conspiracy. But that's it, you definitely got this from Elsa. Or maybe she has it too. But tomorrow I'll still go to her and let her give you a talisman. Which, I don't want your ex-husband to have any influence on you. He kissed his wife tenderly, stroked her rounded belly, and put his ear to it. Barbara, the children are already knocking their feet, asking to be brought into the world as soon as possible. And it's definitely a boy. By the way, what did we decide with the names? The woman smiled and looked at her husband. This issue has been on their agenda for a long time. And if they decided on the name for the girl Mary, in honor of the former mother-in-law, then they did not decide on the name for the boy. Let's ask Elsa. She will be our godmother, so let her give the boy a name herself. Barbara nodded her head in agreement with her husband and kissed him tenderly on the cheek. And really, is it worth arguing with the man you love when everything can be resolved with the help of a wonderful godmother? They stood on the shore of the lake and watched how the sun set in the field, how the winter sun hid behind the rare branches of still bare trees. Barbara was happy that now she had a person next to her who would not just say, "I'm with you," but also protect her, lend her shoulder, and protect her from problems. And may everything be fine for everyone, even Anthony.